Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. The first time I heard the whispers, I was standing at the edge of the property line, just beyond the rotted fence, where the trees were too still, the air too quiet, and the sky above hung like a held breath. I wasn't alone. I could feel that. Not with my eyes, not even with my ears, but deep in my bones. Like something had noticed me long before I noticed it. When you hear about Hollow Hills, people always talk about the accident in '92, the church fire, the missing kids, the bodies they never found. They bring up the Thompson family, the girl who was buried alive, the boy who clawed his way out of his own skin. But no one ever mentions the house at the end of Brier Lane. No one dares. Because that's where everything started. The house isn't on any map. You won't find photos of it online. If you ask a local, they'll go quiet, look over your shoulder, and change the subject like you just spoke the name of something you shouldn't. But it's real. It's as real as the things it hides. I found it through my sister, or rather, her journal. She'd gone missing 3 months before my visit, and the police had closed her case after 2 weeks. No evidence, no leads, not even a decent theory. They said she probably ran off. The typical line. But I knew her better than that. Especially when I found her journal in the crawl space under her bed, sealed in a Ziploc bag, the pages smeared with dirt, and what looked suspiciously like dried blood. Her last entry was just a single line. The house at the end of Brier Lane watches you even when you leave. I didn't know what it meant. Brier Lane didn't exist on GPS. The city archives were empty. But I had one thing, a blurry, hand-drawn map tucked into the back of the journal, with a black X scratched over what looked like a house, labeled in barely legible ink, Dalant Gyo Allen. So naturally, I went alone. It took hours to reach it. I parked a mile away because the road had disappeared beneath a tangle of roots and ash-colored moss. The deeper I walked, the more the world changed. It wasn't just that the forest got darker. It got wrong. Trees bent in unnatural ways, like they were leaning in to listen. The wind didn't move. No birds. No bugs. Just silence, except for the whispers. At first, I thought they were tricks of the wind, snippets of words that didn't make sense. But the closer I got, the clearer they became. Not voices exactly. More like something old trying to remember how to sound like a person. The house itself looked like it had been abandoned for centuries. 3 stories tall, windows shattered, its frame warped like it had grown tired of holding itself together. But it wasn't the decay that stopped me cold. It was the fact that every door and window had been boarded up from the inside. I should have left right then. Any sane person would have. But sanity doesn't mean much when you think your sister's somewhere inside. The moment I stepped over the threshold, everything changed. The air was thicker, heavier, like walking through someone's breath. Dust coated every surface, but there were no cobwebs, no insects, no signs of life. Just that thick, pulsing silence that made my skin crawl. The whispers stopped the second I entered, but I could still feel them, like they were waiting. The house was bigger on the inside, not in a metaphorical way, in a deeply unsettling, physically impossible way. I walked for nearly 10 minutes and didn't pass the same hallway twice. Each room led to another that shouldn't exist, bedrooms that opened into more bedrooms, stairwells that spiraled downward even though I hadn't seen a basement from outside. And every mirror I passed was covered in a black sheet, nailed tight like someone was terrified of what might look back. That's when I saw her. Not my sister. Something else. She was standing at the end of a long corridor, just past the flicker of a broken light. Pale, thin, dressed in white. Hair hanging in wet, clumped strands. Her face was turned away, but I didn't need to see it to know she wasn't human. There was something off about the way she stood. Too still, too deliberate. like a doll someone had forgotten to pose properly. I called out to her. No answer. I took a step forward. She took a step back, vanishing around the corner. I chased after her, but the hallway kept stretching. The end always just out of reach. When I finally reached the corner, she was gone, but in her place was a door. It hadn't been there before. It was deep red, almost black, with a rusted key hanging from a nail above it. On the door was something carved in jagged, uneven strokes. A warning. Don't open it unless you're ready to never leave. I opened it. Beyond was a room unlike any other in the house, perfectly preserved, pristine. A child's bedroom with pastel walls, toys neatly placed on shelves, a mobile still spinning slowly above a crib that hadn't held a baby in decades. But it wasn't empty. There were photographs covering every inch of the walls. Hundreds, maybe thousands, all of people with their eyes scratched out, every one of them smiling. I recognized none of them, until I did. In the bottom right corner, there was a picture of my sister. The same scratch marks over her eyes, smiling that same unnatural smile. That's when the door slammed shut behind me, and the whispers returned, louder, closer. They weren't in my head, they were in the walls. The mobile above the crib spun faster, even though there was no air moving. One of the toys fell off the shelf and cracked open like an egg, revealing what looked like a human tooth. I tried to run, but the door wouldn't budge. The lights flickered. The walls began to bleed. I don't mean metaphorically. Thick, black liquid oozed from the seams, dripping onto the carpet in slow, steady beats like the ticking of a clock. And with every drop, the room changed. The photos began to move. Tiny jerks at first, then full gestures. The smiles widened. Mouths opened, screaming. All of them, screaming without sound. And through it all, I could hear a voice. Not a whisper this time. A voice I knew, my sister. Calling my name, begging me to find her. Telling me to leave. That it wasn't too late. That I hadn't seen it yet. The thing that lived in the house. That the house wasn't the worst part. That came later. I managed to pry the door open with the broken toy, cutting my hand so deep I could see the bone. But the pain didn't matter. What I saw as I escaped the room did, because the hallway wasn't empty anymore. The girl in white was back. Closer this time, and I could see her face. It was mine, twisted, smiling, dead. Then everything went black. I woke up just outside the house, lying in the dead leaves, my clothes soaked in blood. My sister's journal clenched in my fist. The pages were gone. All of them. Except one. If you're reading this, it's already inside you. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't slept since. Every night, I hear the whispers again. In the walls of my apartment. In the static of the TV. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I swear I see someone else behind my eyes, smiling. I haven't told anyone what happened. Who would believe me? But I think it's starting again. And I think I'm not the only one it brought back. Because last night, I found a new photograph pinned to my front door. It was of me, eyes scratched out, smiling. I hadn't left the apartment in 3 days. The light outside didn't feel right anymore, like it came from too far away. I kept the curtains drawn and the lights off, sitting in the dark with the photo clutched in my hand. My own face, staring back at me, scratched out like the others in the house. It wasn't just a picture, it was a warning, or a promise. Either way, I knew it meant the house hadn't let me go. Not really. I was out of it, yes, but some part of it had followed. Maybe that was the plan all along. At night, the whispers came louder. They moved through the walls like water under pressure, slow but impossible to ignore. There was no rhythm to them, no language I could recognize, yet they carried a weight that pressed into my chest and made it hard to breathe. Sometimes I could swear they were arguing or fighting over me. Other times they said nothing, just hummed that low, bone, deep sound like teeth grinding behind a closed door. Then came the static. It started with the television. I'd unplugged it weeks ago, hadn't even touched the remote. Yet every night at 3:03 a.m. it blinked on. White snow covering the screen, volume maxed out, screaming static that made the walls shiver. I tried to get rid of it. Dumped it in the hallway, left it by the stairs. But the next morning, it was always back, sitting perfectly in place. The cord still unplugged. The first time it spoke, it said my name. Not in a voice I recognized, not even fully human. It was as if something was trying to stretch my name into a shape it could use. Drawing it out, twisting it, until it didn't sound like a name anymore. I threw the TV against the wall. It cracked, sparked, died. The next night, it was whole again. That was when the other rooms started shifting. It was subtle at first. My kitchen window was on the left side when I went to bed and on the right side when I woke up. The hallway light flickered to life even though the bulb had blown out weeks earlier. The sink dripped red one night, thick and sticky, and when I looked again it was dry, clean, empty. Nothing ever stayed wrong long enough to catch it on camera. It only happened when I was alone, when no one else could see. I started recording myself while I slept. I didn't want to. God, I didn't, but I had to know. What I saw nearly broke me. In the footage, around 2:56 a.m., the room got darker. Not just dimmer, darker, like the shadows were being poured in through the cracks in the floor. I watched myself toss and turn, restless but unaware. Then, at exactly 3:03 a.m., I stopped moving. My body froze like something was holding me down. A figure appeared in the corner, standing completely still. It wasn't tall, but it was wrong, bent at the joints, trembling like it was barely holding itself together. The static began then, low and crackling through the speakers, even though no electronics were on. The thing stepped forward. Slowly. With each step, the shadows deepened, and then it did something I wasn't prepared for. It leaned in close to the camera, inches away, and smiled. I paused the video there. I still haven't pressed play again. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came the next morning, when I found myself, not the one on the footage, not the real me, but another version. Standing in the hallway mirror. I should be clearer. It wasn't a reflection. I wasn't standing in front of the mirror. I'd walked past it, and it was already looking at me. No delay. No mimic. It blinked before I did, and it was smiling. I shattered the mirror that day. Every mirror in the apartment gone. But even that wasn't enough. Because I started seeing the reflections in other things. In the window, in puddles, in the shine of my phone screen. Always the same thing, me. Smiling, eyes completely black, watching. I decided I had to go back. Not because I wanted to, but because I felt like the longer I stayed away, the more it pulled. Like a tether, invisible but constant, dragging pieces of me back into the house bit by bit. And I couldn't risk becoming whatever that smiling thing was. So I packed a bag, flashlight, rope, camera, the journal, what was left of it, and drove back to Brier Lane. I wasn't ready for what I found. There was no road, no trees, no house. Just an empty field stretching far as I could see, and in the middle of it stood a doorframe. Just that. No walls, no foundation. Just a rotting wooden frame with a closed red door, freestanding, defying reason. Same door from before. Same key still hanging from the nail. I didn't want to touch it. But I did. When I opened the door, I didn't step into the field. I stepped back into the house. Same hallway. Same stench. Same choking silence. But this time, I felt like it had been expecting me. The moment I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut and vanished. I turned to find only wall behind me. No way out. The layout had changed again. It wasn't a house anymore, not really. Just endless halls that twisted and turned, doubling back on themselves. Some doors opening into other versions of the same room. I marked each one with chalk, but they started disappearing behind me, like the walls were breathing, like they were alive. Then came the static again, not just from one room, all of them. TVs I hadn't seen before blinked on across the walls, mounted in impossible places. Every screen showed something different: my sister's face screaming without sound, my apartment drenched in blood, my own body lying still in bed, unmoving. And one screen showed a live feed of me, right there, watching the screen. I turned around fast, nothing. But when I looked again, the version of me on the screen was smiling. Same black eyes, same twisted grin, and he lifted a finger to his lips. Shh. That's when the lights died. I was plunged into total blackness, the kind you feel before you see. My flashlight flickered once and then died. I couldn't hear the static anymore, only breathing, not mine. Something brushed past my leg. Then, a voice in my ear. You opened the door. Now it's your turn. I ran, or I thought I did. But the floor kept shifting beneath me, like I was running in place. Doors opened and slammed, shut around me. Walls rearranged themselves. The house was shifting again, faster, like it was panicking. Like it was trying to trap me before I found something I wasn't supposed to see. And then I saw her, my sister, standing in the middle of the room, pale and broken and crying. I reached for her, and she whispered, "Don't trust anything that wears your face." Before I could respond, the lights snapped back on. I was alone again, but not in the same room. This one was different. The walls were covered in mirrors. Not blacked out like before, clear. And in every one, I saw a different version of myself. Some crying, some laughing, some screaming until their throats tore open, and some just watching. Only one of them was real. I could feel it. But I didn't know which one. Then they all pointed at me and whispered in perfect unison, "You're the reflection now." I woke up hours later, back in the field, staring at the door, my clothes soaked, my skin covered in scratches I couldn't explain. My phone was dead, my camera was gone, but in my hand was a new photo, me, smiling, next to my sister, both of us, eyes scratched out, and beneath it, scribbled in ink that hadn't been there before: "One comes back. One stays forever." And that's when I realized something horrifying. I didn't remember how I got out. The photograph wouldn't burn. I tried. I lit it with a match, held it over the kitchen sink until the flame curled the edges, but it never caught. The fire licked the paper, blackened it slightly, then fizzled into smoke without ever truly touching the image. My sister's face, scratched out. My face, smiling like it didn't belong to me. That twisted grin, too wide for skin to hold. It was a lie, a warning, maybe even a curse. But no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of it. It always came back. Once, I shredded it into pieces and flushed them. The next morning, it was under my pillow, whole again, since returning from the house, or whatever that place was pretending to be. The world around me had started to rot. Not visibly, not all at once. But like milk left in the heat, you can't always see it turning, but you know it is. People talked to me differently. My neighbors avoided eye contact. The mailman skipped my floor. Strangers stared for too long or not at all. And every reflection, every surface with even a hint of shine, showed something I couldn't trust. It wasn't just my face that changed. It was the way I moved in those reflections, slightly off, a delay in the blink, a smirk when I was frowning. They were studying me, waiting. I knew I had to dig deeper, but I didn't know where to start. The house had vanished, the land where it stood now just a dead field. The police wouldn't help, and I couldn't ask friends. I didn't want them pulled into this, whatever this was. So I went back to the journal, to the one page that hadn't rotted away or rewritten itself in blood. It mentioned a name, Saint Aloneso. A hospital, or rather, an asylum, long closed, abandoned for years. That name triggered something, maybe not a memory, but a sensation. Like hearing part of a song from a nightmare you only half remember. My sister had written it beside a phrase she underlined 3 times: "Room 303 is the mouth. Do not speak to it." I found Saint Aloneso in an old directory, buried beneath a pile of neglected files at the city library. No digital trace, no renovation records. It wasn't even zoned anymore. But the building was still there, sitting on the edge of town like a scab no one wanted to pick. I drove out at sunset. The road narrowed the closer I got, until it was no longer pavement, but gravel. Then not even that, just dirt and shadows and the silence that wraps around you like damp cloth. When I parked, the wind picked up, but not like a breeze. It was too focused, like something exhaling just behind my neck. Saint Aloneso stood tall and wide, its brick walls cracked like old bones, windows shattered or missing, vines crawling up its sides like veins on a dying limb. The gate was open, not rusted shut, not locked. Wide open, as if it had been waiting for someone stupid enough to walk through. The front hall smelled like mold, copper, and wet ash. Papers littered the floor. Medical records, prescriptions, torn patient charts with black smudges where names should have been. Graffiti covered the walls, but some of it didn't feel like the usual spray paint. Some of it was carved deep, too deep, etched in long scratches that looked more like claw marks than vandalism. Over and over again, one phrase was scratched into the wood and plastered down, Loci N 303, which, of course, meant I had to. The directory was still bolted to the wall by the entrance, though rust had eaten most of the letters. I could barely make out the floor numbers. Room 303 was on the 3rd floor, down the east wing. Getting there felt wrong. The steps were broken, and the higher I climbed, the colder the air got. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin, but something deeper, in the marrow. Like my bones were being dipped in ice water. The walls whispered again, but not in words. More like memories, faint screams, laughter. A music box somewhere just out of reach. The hallway leading to room 303 was warped. The floor sloped unnaturally downward, even though I was still on the 3rd floor. Fluorescent lights flickered, most of them dead. Every door I passed was sealed tight, except 303. It was cracked open. The door was newer than the others. No rot, no mold. The number plate was pristine. Just 3 numbers in brass, polished like someone wiped them clean every night. The crack in the door showed nothing inside. Just blackness. A hollow, open throat. I didn't want to go in. Every nerve screamed not to. But the photo in my pocket. It burned cold against my leg, like it needed to be here, like I was supposed to bring it back. So I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me. No windows, no lights. Only the sound of the door sealing shut. I flicked on my flashlight and aimed it around. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings. Hundreds of them, all the same story, or almost the same. They spoke of disappearances, children gone missing, strange fires, but the dates were wrong, off by decades. Some listed the current year, some said 1974. Others went as far back as 1881. All mentioned the same phrase: the girl in white was last seen near Hollow Hills. The same girl from the house. The one that wore my face. At the center of the room was a chair, strapped down to the floor, surrounded by dozens of broken TVs stacked like a shrine. Each screen was cracked, but behind the broken glass, static flickered, and one of them was live. My sister's face, tied to the chair, crying, calling my name. I lunged forward, grabbing the screen, shaking it. But my hands passed through. The image distorted, then stabilized. She mouthed something over and over. Don't speak to it. Don't speak to it. Then the static cut. The room changed. The walls pulsed. And behind me, something started to breathe. Not softly, not humanly. Wet, rattling gasps, like lungs filled with water. I turned slowly. The chair was empty. The TVs were gone. And standing where the chair had been was something that had no face. Just a smear where features should be, like it was still deciding which skin to wear. It stepped forward, twitching with each movement, limbs too long, fingers dragging on the floor. It didn't move its mouth, but it spoke, with my sister's voice. Come closer. I backed away. It repeated, louder this time. Come closer. Then again, but different. Help me, then, please. But none of it was real. Not her voice, not really. Just fragments of sound ripped from her throat and stitched together. It was playing her like a recording. Badly. I reached for the door. It wouldn't open. The room shook. The clippings fell off the walls, fluttering like dead birds. The thing stepped forward again. Then it said something new. Something that stopped me cold. I remember your name now. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The thing lunged. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I pulled the photo from my pocket and slammed it against the wall, face out, like some kind of twisted offering. The moment it touched the wall, the thing froze, twitched, and then it screamed. A sound I've never heard before and pray I never hear again. Not pain, not fear, pure hatred, pure rage, like it had been denied something it thought was already its own. The room shattered, and I was falling. When I woke up, I was back in my apartment. But something had changed. The photo was gone, and my phone had one new image saved in the gallery. Room 303. Empty, but written on the wall, in what looked like dried blood, you spoke to it. And beneath that, 4 words that shouldn't exist, you were never alone. I didn't remember taking the photo. My phone had been dead for days. I'd kept it off, buried under a pile of clothes in the corner of my room, too afraid to touch it. But now it was fully charged, the screen bright as if nothing strange had ever happened. The photo stared back at me from the gallery like it had always belonged, their room 303, empty, but smeared with the sentence I couldn't ignore. You spoke to it. That night, the apartment changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to twist familiarity into suspicion. The smell, for instance. It was off. Something bitter, like burnt hair and damp stone, something ancient that had seeped in through the cracks. My furniture had shifted slightly. I knew it had. My couch faced the opposite wall the day before, and the coffee table I always bumped my knee on was now exactly 2 inches to the left. But the most chilling part wasn't what I saw. It was what I heard. A knock. From inside the walls. Not loud, not frantic, just 3 gentle taps. Like something, was knocking from within. I pressed my ear against the plaster, heart thudding, trying to tell myself it was just the pipes, or maybe a neighbor. Then I heard the voice. I'm still hungry. Soft, childlike. Close. I leapt back, stumbling over the shifted table, knocking my lamp to the floor. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hallway, lights on, door unlocked, eyes fixed on the wall, waiting. Listening. I told myself it was a trick, a leftover echo from that place, that house, that asylum. But I knew better. Something had come back with me. Or maybe it never left. The next day, I tried to find help. Not the police. Not the kind of help you can dial. I looked for the priest who used to come by the neighborhood when we were kids. Father Alden. He was the kind of man people whispered about, but never questioned. The kind who saw too much and lived too long. It took me hours to track him down, and when I finally did, he was sitting alone in a church office that looked like it hadn't been used since the 60s. He didn't ask why I was there. He just looked up at me with tired eyes and said, "It followed you, didn't it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a box of cassette tapes, old, dusty, some labeled in faded ink. Names, dates, locations, all scratched out except one. Hollow Hills Manifestation Case for 17. He told me the tapes came from patients. Survivors, if you could call them that. People who had encountered the mouth. A name I hadn't heard before, but somehow recognized instantly. I asked if it was a demon, a ghost, something from hell. He said no. Worse, he said the mouth isn't a thing. It's a place that wants to be a thing. A hunger, a shape learning how to wear flesh. It moves through houses, rooms, people. It learns them, mimics them, eats them, piece by piece, until what's left is just a smile in a photo or a whisper in the wall. And then he told me something I'll never forget. It only needs one door, one moment, one crack, and it never leaves. I asked him how to get rid of it. He didn't laugh. He didn't comfort me. He just looked at me like someone standing over an open grave and said, "You don't get rid of it. You learn where it sleeps." and you pray it doesn't wake up hungry. I took the tape, played it that night. It was quiet at first. Static, then a voice. Female, young, maybe early 20s. Shaky, terrified. She spoke of dreams that bled into waking life, of reflections that moved before she did, of hearing her own voice whispering things she didn't know. She talked about a room in her building, one that hadn't been there before. Room 303. That number again. She said she found it one night, after following a trail of bloody footprints that started inside her bedroom closet. The room was empty, except for a mirror and someone in it. Not her. At the end of the tape, she screamed, loud, raw, sudden, then silence, a click, and another voice. Not hers, something deeper. Wrong. It whispered, I'm in the walls now. That night, I heard the voice again, but this time, not from the walls. From the closet. 3 taps, then can I come out now? I didn't answer. Couldn't move. My mouth went dry, hard hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. I backed away, slowly, eyes fixed on the door. It rattled. Just once. Then silence. I barricaded it. Dresser, chair, everything I could move. Then I locked myself in the bathroom, shaking, heart thudding like war drums. I fell asleep against the tub. When I woke up, the barricade was still there, but the door was open, wide, and carved into the inside panel was something new. Thank you. That day, I noticed something even worse. My reflection. It started lagging. Only for a second, sometimes less. But it was there. That tiny delay between my movement and its response. A glitch. A gap. Just enough to let me know that whatever was mimicking me was getting tired of pretending. Worse still, the reflection had started smiling again. Even when I wasn't. And one night, it didn't mimic me at all. I was brushing my teeth, head down, foam gathering in the sink, and I felt it. That feeling of being watched, even when you're alone. Especially when you're alone. I looked up. The thing in the mirror wasn't brushing its teeth. It was staring, mouth full of black water, eyes wide, smiling. It raised a finger to its lips and said, "She, don't wake the other tenant." Then it vanished, gone. But not forgotten. Because now I hear someone walking in the apartment above me. I live on the top floor. It started with the footsteps. Not loud, not hurried, just steady pacing. Back and forth across the ceiling, just above my bed. I would have blamed a new tenant if it weren't for the fact I lived on the top floor. There was no apartment above mine, just the roof. And yet, every night the footsteps returned, dragging slowly, pausing every few minutes like whoever, or whatever, was up there was stopping to listen. I tried to ignore it. For the first 3 nights, I did everything I could not to react. I stayed perfectly still, lights off, pretending to be asleep. But the footsteps didn't care. They always stopped directly above me, never moving on until I opened my eyes. On the 4th night it spoke. Not loudly, not clearly, but some voice, pressed itself through the air vent near the corner of my ceiling. A soft, scratching whisper. I couldn't make out the words at first, just the sound of breath brushing against metal. Too slow to be wind, too purposeful to be imagined. Then it said something I did recognize. My name, not once, but over and over, each time more sure of itself, each time more real. It said my name in the voice of my sister. I scrambled out of bed and jammed a towel into the vent. I taped it down with duct tape, then shoved a bookshelf in front of it, like that could somehow stop a voice from slithering its way through steel and shadow. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the voice that mattered. It was what came with it. That night, my lights flickered violently. The bulb in the hallway popped. My television turned on, static again, but this time, something moved in the fuzz. Just the outline of a figure. Watching, not doing anything else. Just there. I unplugged everything. Didn't help. Even the unplugged screens glowed faintly, like they were dreaming. The next morning, the hallway outside my apartment smelled like smoke, but there was no fire. Just that bitter, charred scent clinging to the air, like something had been burned clean away. My neighbors' doors were all shut tight. No sounds, no music, no conversation. Not even the barking dog from 4B. Dead silence, too perfect to be normal. The elevator was out of service. I didn't take the stairs. Instead, I went back inside and called the building's manager. No answer. His voicemail was full. I tried texting. It bounced back, number not in service. I remembered seeing him 2 days ago, arguing with someone in the lobby about a rent receipt. I thought about going to his office downstairs, but something stopped me. When I turned toward the door, I felt watched. Not through the peephole, not through the windows. From inside the apartment. I turned back around, scanning every inch of the room. Nothing looked off. Nothing moved. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sharing space with someone else. Someone I couldn't see but who had always been there, just waiting for me to notice. Later that day, the bookshelf I'd wedged against the air vent had moved. Not far, just a few inches to the left. But the towel I'd jammed inside was missing entirely. The duct tape still hung in ragged strips from the edges, peeled back like careful fingers had peeled it away one by one. I started recording everything. My phone, an old camcorder, even a motion, activated nanny cam I ordered overnight. But none of it caught anything. Nothing moved on screen. Nothing spoke. Even the footsteps, when recorded, vanished entirely. But I heard them every night, clearer, heavier, sometimes joined by a second set. Then came the smell. Sulfur, rot, like something had died in the walls. It seeped in through the vents, under the floorboards, out of the faucets. I tore open every cabinet, searched for rats, mold, a gas leak, anything that would make this make sense. But the apartment was clean, spotless. Not a single trace of what my senses were screaming at me. And then I saw her, in the hallway, my sister, standing barefoot in a hospital gown, hair hanging in wet clumps, eyes wide and unblinking. No scratches this time, no distortion, just her. Still, silent, I rushed out. The hallway was empty. No trace, no footprint, just a single drop of water on the floor, like something had just stepped out of a lake. That night, the voice through the vent came back, but it wasn't my sister anymore. It was me, saying things I've never said, repeating words in a loop, but wrong, mispronounced. Like something had listened to me speak and was now learning to copy me syllable by syllable, and it was getting good at it. The scariest part wasn't the voice. It was the question it asked after an hour of mimicry. Why did you leave me behind? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat clenched, body frozen, because I knew it wasn't really asking. It was accusing. Blaming. That's when I realized something bone-chilling. There was no room 303 in my building. Never had been. I checked every floor, every blueprint I could find. Apartment 303 didn't exist, but I kept seeing it, in dreams. In the way the mail piled up, outside a locked door, halfway down my hallway. In the elevator's flickering screen, when it skipped past the 3rd floor and blinked 303. Oh pun, even though the door never did. I knocked on that door once, just once. The wood felt warm, breathing, and I swear I heard movement on the other side. Then a whisper, barely audible. Let me wear you. I ran. That was last night. Today, I found something inside my fridge, taped to the inner wall. A new photo. It was my apartment, but empty. And in the middle of the room, standing where I always sit, was a figure with my shape, my clothes, my stance. But not my eyes. The eyes were black holes, bottomless, bleeding shadows that dripped down its cheeks like tears. And on the back of the photo, written in the same jagged hand as the rest, you are the other tenant now. Welcome home. By the time the televisions started turning on by themselves, I had already stopped trusting silence. The quiet was never empty. It was a setup, a breath held just long enough for something to lean in close. The apartment had become a maze of flickering lights and shifting reflections, but the televisions were the worst. I didn't own more than one, but now every screen glowed: the dead laptop, the old phone in the drawer, the microwave's faded display. All of them began showing the same thing: static, then black, then the faint outline of a room I didn't recognize. A room with no windows, no door, just a chair, and someone in it. At first, the figure was barely visible, a silhouette drowned in fuzz. But each night, the picture sharpened, slowly, like whatever it was sitting there was moving closer to the screen. The first time I saw its face, I stopped sleeping. It was mine, but twisted, not angry, not crying, smiling. A smile stretched too far, too calm, like it knew something I didn't, something final. I tried smashing the TV again. That did nothing. I tried unplugging it, even cutting the cord. It still flickered to life at exactly 3:03 a.m., humming softly like a heartbeat. The static began to hum in a familiar pattern, one I started to recognize. It was the sound of breathing, not mine. The kind that drips down the back of your neck, crawling into your ears and whispering the things you try not to remember. One night, I watched the static with the lights off. I told myself I wouldn't look away, no matter what. I needed to see it, to face it, whatever it was. At first, there was just white noise. Then the camera shifted. The angle changed. It was no longer showing the chair from across the room. It was showing me asleep in my bed. But I wasn't asleep. I was wide awake, staring at the screen, watching myself sleep. I blinked, and the person in the bed blinked back. That's when I noticed something else. The way the static rippled in the corners of the screen. Not just digital noise, hands. Pressing from the inside like someone, or something, was pushing against the barrier, trying to reach through, trying to swap places. The next morning, I found mud in my sheets. Mud and long, wet strands of hair that weren't mine. I started stacking salt around my apartment, convinced it was some kind of barrier. I lined my doors, the windows, even circled my bed. I read somewhere that it could stop things. But whatever rules I thought applied here didn't. Because that night, the salt wasn't disturbed. It was gone. Every grain, gone. Swept away like it had never been there. The TV turned on again. This time earlier, 2:47 a.m. No static, just darkness. I leaned in, expecting nothing. And then the screen tapped from the inside. Once. Twice. 3 times. And on the third knock, something grinned back at me through the screen. Not a reflection. Not a video. It looked at me like it knew me. Like it had been watching for a long, long time. Then it whispered through the speakers, "Let's trade." I yanked the plug. Nothing. Still glowing. I threw a blanket over it. Didn't help. The glow shone through like it was burning from inside the glass. So I left. At 3:08 a.m., I was out the door, barefoot, clutching my keys, running down the hallway. The air smelled like mildew and rotting flowers. I banged on the neighbors' doors. No one answered. I kept going. Down 3 flights of stairs until I hit the lobby. That's when I realized something wasn't right. The building was wrong. It looked the same. The wallpaper, the flickering chandelier, the cracked tile near the mailboxes. But outside the glass door was nothing. No street, no sky, just endless fog. Thick and gray, pulsing like lungs, swallowing every shape beyond it. I stood frozen. Then the lobby phone rang. An old rotary phone mounted on the wall behind the desk. It hadn't worked since I moved in. I walked toward it slowly, like approaching a sleeping animal. I picked it up. Nothing. Just breathing. Then a voice that was exactly like mine said, "I'm home," and hung up. When I turned around, the elevator door was open. Inside stood a version of me, clothes cleaner, hair neater, but the same face. Except for the eyes, completely black. And smiling, we stared at each other. He didn't move. I ran. Back up the stairs, past my floor, past the 5th, the 6th, until I hit the 7th. One that didn't exist. There were only 6 floors in this building. But the 7th greeted me with a single hallway, lined with dozens of doors, each identical, each numbered 303. I opened one at random. Inside was a copy of my apartment, identical. Down to the faint water stain on the ceiling above the stove. But different in one horrible way. There was a version of me in the chair, eyes gouged out, smiling still. The television in front of him was on, showing another version of me screaming silently from inside the screen. I backed out, slammed the door, tried another. Same apartment, same setup, only this time the TV showed my sister, and she wasn't screaming, she was laughing. The laugh echoed even after I slammed that door too. I ran down the hallway, trying to find a way back. Every door said 3U3, no stairs, no windows. Until I saw one door slightly cracked open, with light spilling out. I pushed through it and found myself back in my own apartment. Same layout, same walls, same worn carpet under my feet. But something felt off. I walked to the living room. The TV was off. The salt lines were back. I felt a strange moment of relief, until I looked at the reflection in the black screen. It was me, but not me. I wasn't blinking, and neither was he. Then, without moving his mouth, the reflection spoke. Now that we've both been inside, a pause. You understand there's no such thing as outside. The screen cracked. Not from damage. From within. Spiderweb lines blossomed across it like veins. The lights in the apartment dimmed. My phone buzzed on the table. One new image. It was me, standing at the window. Except I had no face, and behind me, in the reflection, he was still smiling, and he was holding the remote. I didn't know when I started hearing the scraping. It wasn't loud at first, just a faint, dragging sound beneath the floor, like nails over old wood. I thought it was mice, maybe a busted pipe shifting in the cold. But over the days it got louder, closer, more deliberate, like something was dragging itself inch by inch, day by day, toward the surface. The kind of sound that has intention behind it. The kind that's not supposed to exist under concrete and steel. And every time I walked across the living room floor, I felt it. Pressure. Like the boards weren't just sagging. Like they were breathing beneath me. I stopped stepping near the middle of the room. I found myself hugging the walls, taking long paths from the couch to the kitchen just to avoid that one spot. But that didn't help. The scraping followed. Sometimes it echoed under my bed, sometimes the bathroom, and once I heard it behind me. Even though there was no floor beneath my back when I was standing, I froze, heart pounding, breath caught in my throat. It stopped. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks from beneath my feet. I wanted to believe I was losing my mind. It would have been easier. But denial died the morning I woke up and found the living room rug pushed aside and the floorboards pried open. 4 of them, cracked and curling up like they'd been peeled back by something with too many fingers. Beneath them wasn't insulation, no concrete. Just dirt. Damp, black, and shifting. Like it had recently been disturbed. I didn't dare reach down. Instead, I shined a flashlight into the opening. There was movement. Something pale, slithering just out of reach, gone too fast to focus on. But not before I saw what it left behind. A photo. Same size, same jagged edges, but different this time. It was my bedroom, empty, except for the closet door, wide open, and inside it, half, hidden in the dark, was a shape that looked just like me, except it was crawling out on all 4s, mouth wide open, teeth too many to count. I tried to burn it. Like the others, it wouldn't catch. Instead, the corner curled upward on its own, and I swear I heard it whisper. Not with words. With breath. That's when I realized the thing beneath the floor wasn't trapped. It wasn't hiding. It was growing. That night, the TV didn't turn on. No static. No smiling version of myself. No whispers. Just silence. But it wasn't a relief. It felt like holding your breath right before a scream. The next day, I left the apartment. I needed air, noise, people. Anything else. But the world outside had turned gray. Not just in color, but in feeling. Every person I passed on the street avoided my eyes. Even the sky looked artificial, like it had been painted there last minute. I found a diner and sat at the counter. The waitress asked what I wanted and looked directly through me. I asked her if she was okay. She leaned in slowly, smile frozen. and whispered, "Whatever you do, don't let it take your skin." Then walked away. I left without paying. I don't think she noticed. Back at the apartment, the door was ajar. I hadn't left it that way. When I stepped inside, every light was on. Every faucet was running. My bed was overturned. The salt lines were ruined, scattered across the floor like someone, or something, had danced through them on purpose, and scratched into the drywall, with perfect precision, were the words "Wow Tiafilo Arnado." It didn't make sense, until I heard the voice. Low. Not through the vent, not through the TV, but from the floorboards, from the cracks beneath me. And it said, "Come down." Then the wood cracked beneath my heel. Just a little, but enough. Enough to show me something that froze my lungs. An eye, open, watching me from beneath the floor. I stepped back, but the cracks followed. Every inch I moved, the wood split more, revealing black, churning soil and twitching white fingers that curled in anticipation. I ran to the kitchen. The tiles buckled, ran to the bathroom. The drain gurgled, laughing in a voice that was almost mine. And when I turned back toward the living room, the floor had opened completely. A pit, black and endless and lined with photographs. Thousands of them, spinning slowly in the air like leaves caught in a windless fall. Each one of me, each one worse than the last. In one I had no mouth, in another no eyes, in the last I had no skin, and beneath that pit, down in the writhing dark, was a sound. Something rising, scraping, pulling itself up. I slammed the door and ran to the hallway, pressed the elevator button a dozen times. It didn't come. The lights flickered, and all the numbers above the doors changed to 303. Every one. The stairs were gone. I opened the emergency exit and found a blank brick wall. Trapped. The door to my apartment creaked open behind me. I turned, and something stepped out. It looked like me. Sounded like me, but its skin was inside out, raw and steaming, smiling with teeth that reached to its ears. It held out a hand and said, "You left the door open." Then everything went black. I woke up hours later, on the floor. The pit was gone, the boards back in place, the apartment clean. But there was one new thing, a crawlspace door in the corner of my room. One I'd never seen before. And carved above it, in the same perfect handwriting UNDRNHISMAITNG, the crawlspace hadn't been there the night before. I was certain of it. I knew every inch of that room. The crooked radiator, the scratch on the wall from the chair I once kicked during a nightmare. The uneven patch of ceiling where the water had stained the plaster. But now, in the corner between the bed and the closet, a square wooden hatch had appeared. Old, warped, its hinges rusted and breathing with the rhythm of the room. It wasn't just new, it was wrong, like the apartment had grown a new limb overnight, and now it itched for me to notice. For a long time, I just stared at it. I didn't move, didn't speak. I watched the way the dust floated above it, never landing, always hovering like the space beneath it was exhaling. The handle was iron, black, covered in something slick and brown that looked too fresh to be rust. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to know what waited beneath. But I also knew this wasn't something I could ignore. The house, the thing that pretended to be a house, wasn't done with me. It had given me a new opening, and it was patient. That night, I didn't sleep. The hatch whispered, not words, just soft, wet sounds, like teeth sliding over glass. I sat in the farthest corner of the apartment, light on, shaking, listening to something below the floor shift with weight. It wasn't the same as the scraping from before. This was different. Heavier, like something had finally arrived. Just past 3 a.m., I heard the latch click open. I turned, heart seizing in my chest, and saw the hatch was ajar. Just a crack, just enough for the warm breath of something below to roll out into the room. The whispering stopped, but in the silence, I heard the sound of skin dragging over wood, and something began climbing up. I didn't look. I couldn't. I ran into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat against it until the sun came up, every second expecting fingers to wrap around the edges and knock. They never did. When I finally emerged, the hatch was shut, but now it had a lock on it, a new one, and a key placed on top. I should have run, should have left the building and never looked back, but leaving hadn't worked before. Every time I tried, the world outside twisted. Faces blurred, time bent. No matter how far I went, I always came back here. Like the apartment followed me. Like it had become a skin I couldn't take off. So I took the key, and I opened the hatch. Beneath was darkness. Not just blackness, but depthless, like it didn't reflect light, only ate it. The kind of dark that felt solid in your throat, like you were breathing velvet soaked in ash. A wooden ladder descended into the void, each rung older than the last, flaking under my fingers. I climbed down. It took forever. The air got colder, then warmer, then wet. The walls grew soft, like I was crawling through the ribcage of something buried. The smell changed. First dirt, then rot, then something sweet and rotting, like overripe fruit left in a corpse's mouth. I kept going, and then I reached the bottom, but there was no floor, just a room that had grown beneath me all at once. It looked like a replica of my apartment, same furniture, same layout, but everything was mirrored, like someone had rebuilt it based on a description they only half remembered. The pictures on the wall were wrong. They were all of me, in rooms I didn't recognize, doing things I didn't remember. In one photo, I was standing over someone in bed, holding something long and sharp. In another, I was smiling at a camera, covered in what looked like blood. And in the final photo, I was lying in the crawl space, eyes open, staring up at nothing, mouth wide and screaming. But no sound was captured, just the motion of a scream caught in stillness. Then I noticed the TV, same model as mine, same static hum, and on the screen, 11 feet of my apartment, the real one. Upstairs, someone was walking through it. They looked like me, moved like me, but they weren't me. They walked to the hatch, turned to the screen, and smiled directly at the camera. Then shut the hatch from above. I screamed, climbed back up. The ladder was gone, only stone above me now, solid, no seams, no cracks, just sealed shut. I banged, clawed, shouted, no answer. And then the lights went out. The TV died. The silence returned. But I wasn't alone. I felt them first. Dozens of tiny hands brushing against my legs, crawling up my back, pulling at my hair. I lashed out, screamed again, but there was no sound, not even from myself. The air swallowed everything. I dropped to my knees, clutching my ears, praying to wake up, to not be here. And then a voice said, right behind me, "You're in the basement now." It wasn't mine. It wasn't my sister's. It was the house. Not a person, not a ghost, not some creature with claws. It was the house itself, speaking with every wall, every floorboard, every whisper, every warped reflection. You were always meant to stay. That's what homes are for. It showed me then. Flickers, pulses, thoughts not mine. People before me, dozens, hundreds, all of them lured in by voices, photos, familiar faces. Rooms that weren't supposed to be there. All of them locked inside. And none of them ever left. I was just the newest piece of furniture. I passed out on the cold floor. Maybe hours later. Maybe days. When I woke up, I was back in my apartment. Everything was where it had been, but nothing felt real. I walked to the hatch, still there, still locked. But now, the key was inside my mouth. And scratched into the wood above the lock was one new sentence. "We let you out so you can let others in." I didn't remember falling asleep, but I woke with the taste of rust on my tongue and the key clutched between my teeth. My jaw ached from the pressure, as if I'd been grinding it all night. I spat it into my palm, the metal warm and pulsing faintly like a living thing. The hatch in the corner was still shut, still locked, but now it didn't feel like it was keeping something in. It felt like it was keeping something out. That distinction mattered. It was small, but sharp enough to slice the air around me. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet you feel rather than hear, like the air itself is holding its breath. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't touch the TV. I sat at the table with the key in front of me and stared at the hatch like it was watching me back. Maybe it was. Maybe it always had been. At 3:03 a.m., the knock came, but not from the vent, not from the walls or the floorboards. This time, it came from the door. 3 soft taps. Then silence. I didn't move. I held my breath, blood thudding in my ears. Then, from the other side, a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Hey, it's me. My sister." No hesitation. Just those 3 words, muffled and casual, like she was back from a walk. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't vanished into a nightmare that kept opening itself wider each time I blinked. I stayed seated. Another knock. A little louder. "Come on. Open up." I didn't. The peephole was fogged over, just a blur of movement beyond the wood. I whispered, "What's my name?" A pause. "Then you know what it is?" I asked again. "What's my name?" A beat longer this time, too long. Then came a different voice, lower, mocking. "You're the one who left me behind." The handle turned, slow and steady. I'd locked it, chained it, jammed it with a chair. But still, it moved. Not much, just enough to rattle against the wood. Then footsteps retreated. I didn't sleep again. The next day, I found a package at the door. No return address, just my name. I opened it carefully, hands shaking. Inside were 6 photographs. Each one showed someone standing outside my apartment door. Different people, different times of day. All looking directly at the peephole. Some smiling, some blank, one crying. But in each photo their eyes were scratched out. The last photo was of me, standing at the door, holding the box I was now opening. I dropped it, backed away. The key on the table trembled slightly, as if the air had shifted. Then my phone rang. A number I didn't know. I answered. A recording played, my own voice, saying they're coming to visit. Click. That night, the knocking started again. But not just one door, all of them. My front door, my closet, the bathroom, even the hatch, all knocking, slow and steady, one after another like a chain reaction, like something was testing the locks, seeing which one would give first. I screamed, "What do you want from me?" And somewhere inside the apartment, something answered to be invited in. I didn't move the rest of the night. In the morning, my phone had a new message, a voicemail. No missed call, just static. Then, faintly, a recording of my front door opening, followed by my voice, breathy, welcoming. "Come on in." I checked the locks. Still bolted, still chained, but the rug by the door had shifted, and there was a single, bare footprint on the tile. Someone had been inside. I checked every room, every cabinet, every corner. Nothing. No one. Until I opened the closet and saw the coat. Not mine. Long, black, damp, still dripping. Hanging among my things like it belonged. Pinned to the collar was a note. "Every home needs guests." From then on, things began to move when I wasn't looking. Chairs shifted. Cups vanished. Lights flicked on in rooms I hadn't entered. I started placing objects in specific spots, checking them every few minutes. They never stayed, and sometimes they came back changed. A spoon bent in a spiral. A book whose pages were now blank, except for the last one, which simply said, "You're hosting now." I left the apartment once, desperate for a break. I walked for hours, trying to find a sense of distance, of escape. When I finally looked up, I was standing at my own front door, even though I'd walked across the city. Even though I had no memory of turning around. My hand was already on the handle. The key was in my pocket. That night, I gave up and turned on the TV. It didn't show static this time. It showed a live feed of my apartment from multiple angles, all at once, each room, each corner, and in every one, a shadow stood where I couldn't see from my seat, behind the couch, next to the fridge, in the crawl space. One even stood behind me. I didn't turn around. I watched the screen, and the shadows moved, dancing slowly in place. A twitch of the hand, a nod of the head, smiling. One stepped closer to the camera and held up a sign. white. Bold letters written in black marker. You've made it cozy. We'll bring more. Then every screen went dark, and behind me I heard the hatch open. Again. The hatch didn't creak or bang open. It slid, slow and soundless, like it had been waiting for the right moment. I didn't turn to look. My eyes stayed fixed on the blank TV screen, where only seconds ago I'd watched the shadows move like they owned the place. I told myself not to breathe, not to twitch, as if stillness could hide me from something that had already stepped through the front door, through the walls, through me. But I felt it, the change in the room, like gravity had twisted sideways, like the temperature dropped by a single degree that somehow made everything inside me scream run. And then came the voice, not loud, not angry. Soft. Curious. You remember me now, don't you? It wasn't my voice this time. It wasn't my sister's. It was something older. Something that didn't belong in a human throat, but was trying its best to sound right. Like a child reciting words they didn't understand, but could mimic perfectly. I turned. Slowly. The hatch was open wide, and from it came a shape I couldn't fully process. Not because it was hidden, but because my mind refused to let it in. The more I looked, the more my brain skipped like a scratched record. Parts of it flickered in and out, like it hadn't fully decided what it wanted to be yet. But there was a face, and it looked like mine. Only older. Faded. Dissolved, almost like it had spent too many years underwater or buried in dirt. It blinked slowly, unnaturally, each blink taking seconds too long. It climbed the rest of the way out, knees bending the wrong direction, arms trailing behind like forgotten limbs, and stood in the center of my room as if it had always lived there, watching me, breathing in time with the lights, which now pulsed with each inhale. I was the first one in, it whispered. Long before your sister, long before the door. My throat felt full of gravel. In what? The house, it said, tilting its head like a question. The one behind all the others. The house that isn't really a house. I wanted to ask more, but every word died before reaching my tongue. It stepped forward, its feet leaving no sound, no mark, as if it was floating just beneath the surface of the floor. Its hand reached out, not fast, not threatening, just present. Do you know what happens when someone stays too long? It asked. We learn to wear them. I backed away, hit the wall. No exit, no door. Just cold paint and wallpaper that was beginning to breathe beneath my palms. Its hand didn't stop. Just hovered there, inches from my chest. You're not the first to try and leave, it said. But you're the first we've let come back. Why me? I managed, voice hoarse. Its smile widened. Split? Because you opened the door and the mouth. I didn't understand until it showed me. It stepped back and raised both arms like curtains. And the room, my room, peeled away, just for a second. And I saw beneath, not a basement, not a crawl space, something deeper. An entire nest of rooms, impossible rooms, stacked and writhing, each one with someone inside, screaming or smiling or both. Some were old, some were new. And in every single one, the walls moved like lungs, like they were feeding. They never really leave, the thing whispered. They just move lower. I fell to the floor. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes, hours. When I opened my eyes again, it was gone. The hatch was closed. But now, scratched into the wood where the key once rested, were coordinates. Just numbers. No explanation. I didn't want to follow them, but I knew I would. Because in that moment I realized something chilling. The first one in was me. Or would be. Because this thing, it wasn't showing me the past. It was showing me the future. And I had already started to change. That night, I slept with the lights on, the TV off, and the hatch barricaded. But it didn't matter. Because I dreamed of a house with no windows, no roof. Just endless walls and endless doors. And at the end of every hallway was a mirror, and every mirror showed me. Except the one that smiled back. That one stepped out. I held the paper with the coordinates for hours before I typed them into my phone. Part of me expected gibberish, latitude and longitude that led to the middle of an ocean or some remote desert. Instead, they pointed to a place barely an hour outside the city. A forest preserve I'd never heard of, on the edge of some county line where the GPS signal stutters and the roads stop being roads. There were no reviews online, no pictures, not even a name. Just a small green splotch on the map, labeled as private land. I didn't want to go. I knew that. I knew it like you know the stove is hot before you touch it, but the pull was stronger than fear. It always is. The house, the thing that pretends to be a house, had stopped pushing. Now, it was inviting. That terrified me more, because it meant I'd already been chosen. The trees were dense when I arrived. They shouldn't have been. It was late autumn, and the trees everywhere else had already dropped their leaves. But here, the forest was full, the canopies thick and green, shadows hanging in the branches like cobwebs. I parked the car on a gravel shoulder and stepped out into air that didn't feel like it belonged to this season. It was heavy, humid, and somehow wrong, as if I'd crossed into a pocket of forgotten time. The path wasn't marked. I had to follow the map on my phone, watching the blue dot crawl forward through nothing. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. No birds, no insects. Even my footsteps sounded muted, swallowed by moss-covered ground. Every few feet I passed things that shouldn't have been there, a baby shoe half buried in the dirt, a cracked mirror hanging from a tree by a noose of vines, a rusted rotary phone nailed to a stump. And then I saw it. Not a house. Not yet. Just a doorframe, standing in the clearing. Freestanding, wood gray with age, no building behind it. A doorless frame, hollow, a rectangle of shadow that cut into the air like a knife. I should have turned back. I should have run. But something in my chest moved, something familiar. Like when you forget a name and suddenly remember it in your sleep. I stepped through the frame. The air changed. It was like being plunged underwater, except I could still breathe, barely. The trees around me twisted. Not visibly, but subtly, their bark darkening, their shapes warping into versions of themselves that didn't follow logic. And ahead of me, just beyond the next rise, sat the house. The same house. The one from Hollow Hills. 3 stories tall, rotted and wrong, with windows like eye sockets and a roof that bent slightly in the middle, as if bowed from the weight of secrets. But now it was alive. Lights flickered in the upstairs window. Smoke curled from the crooked chimney, and the front door hung open, waiting. My feet moved before my thoughts could catch up. Each step on the overgrown path felt like walking on breath, soft, shifting, alive. The house creaked in anticipation. That's the only way I can describe it. Not the groan of settling beams or old floorboards, but something organic, something excited. I crossed the threshold, and immediately I was inside my own apartment. Same furniture, same scent, same layout, but slightly wrong. The couch was 3 inches too far left. The light in the bathroom was on, even though I'd never turned it on. The faucet dripped in a slow, steady beat that matched my heart. I walked from room to room. Everything was a replica, but none of it was mine. Like a copy made by someone who had only seen photos and tried to fill in the blanks. In the kitchen, the cabinets were labeled, not with brands or stickers, but names. My name on one, my sister's on another, and one I didn't recognize. I opened mine first. Inside was a row of glass jars, each filled with something organic and unidentifiable. One held a tooth. Another, what looked like a sliver of bone. At the bottom of the cabinet, a photo. Me asleep. Taken from just inches above my bed. I slammed it shut. I opened the cabinet labeled with my sister's name. It was empty. No jars. Just one thing. A key. Old. Iron. Warm to the touch. I took it without thinking. The last cabinet I hesitated. The name on it was partially burned. The letters scorched out like the house itself had tried to forget. But something told me that's where the answers were. I opened it. Inside was a book, leather bound, too soft, wet. When I touched it, I heard voices, all at once, screaming, begging, laughing, and beneath them, the soft hum of something content, something that had fed well and often. I opened the book. The pages weren't written, they moved. Each one flickered with images, faces I didn't know, places I'd never been. A man sobbing in a stairwell, a woman crawling out of a mirror, a child speaking backward through a smile. And in every single one, somewhere in the corner of the frame, was the doorframe I had walked through. It was always there, a constant, a witness, or maybe a gateway. I dropped the book, and it screamed when it hit the floor. I turned and ran back through the hall, but the front door was gone, just wall now, seamless. I was trapped, again. But then, a voice called out, clear, familiar, from upstairs, my sister. Hey, are you here too? I froze. It was her voice, not the imitation from the door, not the glitchy mimicry from the vents or the screen. Hers, real, shaking, human. I took the stairs 2 at a time, each step sinking deeper than it should have, like the staircase was made of sponge. The hallway above twisted like a spiral. Pictures lined the walls, versions of me with people I didn't recognize. Some photos were just black, others moved, slowly, like the image was still developing. The door at the end of the hall was cracked open. Inside, a dim light flickered. Please, her voice whispered. I'm so tired. I pushed the door open, and I saw her. Not dead, not distorted, just sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, hugging her knees. Pale, weak, but real. She looked up at me, and for the first time since this began, I saw something human in her eyes. Recognition. You made it, she said. I nodded, barely able to speak. She smiled faintly. You shouldn't have come back. The floor shuddered. The walls flexed, and the door behind me slammed shut, locked, and then her face changed, subtly. Her smile grew too wide, her eyes too still, and she whispered, but I'm so glad you did. I took a step back, just one. The floor beneath me felt soft, warmer than before, like flesh stretched too tight over bone. My sister didn't move, didn't blink. She just watched me with that fragile smile, her arms still wrapped around her knees, like she was waiting for the rest of the world to catch up to something she already knew. The walls around us pulsed once, barely visible, but real enough to make the wallpaper ripple, as if it were breathing. The air smelled sour, like metal left in the rain. I couldn't speak. Couldn't ask the questions clawing at the edge of my throat. She was too calm. She looked too much like herself. And that was the problem, because this place had shown me again and again what it could do. How it could wear us. How it could study us, pick at our memories, and craft perfect copies that spoke with our voices and wore our faces like masks made from glass. But she looked so tired, that kind of exhaustion no illusion could mimic. So I whispered, when did it take you? She looked up at me and didn't answer. Instead, she asked, do you remember the lake house? And I froze. Because I did. Because I didn't think she would. We'd only been there once, when we were kids, 6 and 10, before our parents started pretending silence was a kind of love. She almost drowned. I pulled her out by her hair. Neither of us talked about it after. It was like the water had swallowed the memory, and we only caught glimpses of it in dreams. I nodded slowly. Yeah. Her smile cracked, just a little. Something behind it twitched, like something pulling at skin from the inside. That was the first time it saw me. The room grew colder. I didn't know back then, she said, still hugging her knees. It just watched. For years. In mirrors. In the dark corners of dreams. In the hum of the fridge when I stood alone in the kitchen. It never rushed. It waited. Until I broke something in myself. That's when it climbed in. She looked up again. I let it in, thinking I was closing a door. But I was just locking myself inside. I stepped closer. My shadow fell across her face. It didn't move. Didn't match the lighting in the room. Are you still you? I asked. She nodded. But only once. Mostly. The floor groaned beneath us. The walls shook again. Somewhere behind me, another door slammed. Then another, like the house was sealing itself up, preparing for something. "I'm not supposed to be awake," she said. "It doesn't like when we remember." She stood slowly, wobbling like her legs hadn't been used in years. "You opened 2 doors," she whispered. "The houses and the mouth. That's how it crossed. That's how it splits." Splits. She didn't answer. She walked past me, barefoot and slow, into the hallway that had twisted behind me. I followed. The lights overhead flickered, not in broken bursts, but in patterns. 2 blinks. Pause. 3 more. Like code, like breath. "I tried to warn you," she said. "Through the journal. Through the dreams. I left cracks. I remembered the journal. How the pages vanished. How the words changed. How the paper bled. It rewrites everything," I said quietly. "Yes," she whispered. "But not memories. Not if they're buried deep enough." We reached the end of the hallway. Another door stood there, this one different. New. Metal instead of wood. Covered in scratch marks and small, dirty handprints pressed into rust. Above it, a plaque that read, "We are the forgotten ones." She looked at me. Eyes glassy, empty. "It started here," she said. "Not the house. The first version, before it learned how to build walls." I grabbed the handle. It was freezing. "You shouldn't," she said, almost gently. "I have to," I replied. She didn't stop me. Inside, the room was small, a nursery, but twisted, everything out of proportion. Crib too tall, rocking horse too small, toys piled in impossible shapes that looked more like bones than plastic. On the wall was a mural, children, hand-painted, their faces cheerful except the paint on their eyes had been smeared clean off. The rocking horse moved once. Just once. And then the whisper came from the corner of the ceiling. "You've seen too much." The voice was neither hers nor mine. It was hundreds, speaking in broken, overlapping cadence. From the shadows stepped a thing. Not just a shape this time. Not just a face. A collection of forms, all fused together. Arms where there shouldn't be. Jaws stitched into bellies. Legs bending backwards. Every part of it was someone. Eyes blinked in strange places. Some of them were mine. Some of them were hers. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. It came close. Close enough to press its mouth. One of them, against my cheek. And it said, "You are the last key." Behind me, my sister began to hum. Softly. A lullaby I hadn't heard since the lake house. The thing twitched, froze, then split down the center. Not bleeding, just opening, and inside it a hallway. Dark, wet, endless. She reached for my hand. "This is where it begins again," she said. "But if you follow me, it doesn't end the same." I looked back at the door we'd come through. Gone. The room was now just walls. Breathing. I took her hand and stepped inside the thing that had once been human. That had become the house. That had become everything. And the hallway closed behind us. Somewhere, far above, in an apartment that now belonged to no one, the hatch clicked shut. We walked through it in silence, my sister and I, hand in hand, through the long, pulsing corridor that stretched from the impossible opening inside the thing that called itself the house. The walls weren't made of stone or wood. They throbbed soft and slick like they'd been grown instead of built, veined with dark rivers that pulsed with light, slow and rhythmic. The deeper we went, the more the air felt thick, humming with pressure, like it wasn't meant to be breathed by lungs. Time bent inside that corridor. There were no seconds, no minutes, just heartbeat after heartbeat. Each step felt like a test. Sometimes we passed doors, thin, almost invisible slits in the wall that whispered as we walked by. They called to me, softly, sweetly, in voices I knew, my mother, my own voice, her voice. One door begged, "Come home." Another wept quietly. One repeated a phrase over and over, "It's safe here. Just sleep." I kept walking. So did she. Until we reached a door unlike the others. This one was metal, smooth, clean, untouched by the rot that soaked the rest of this place. It hummed with cold energy, and in the center, where a handle should be, was a symbol I had only seen once before. Back in my apartment, carved into the back of the bathroom mirror, just before it shattered on its own. 3 circles, overlapping, like a diagram of infection. She touched it with her palm, and the door side open. Inside was not a room. It was a memory. My memory. The lake. The dock. Sunlight like melted gold across the water. The smell of wet leaves and pine in childhood, but twisted. The colors bled at the edges. The sky flickered, too fast to be natural. And there I was, standing at the edge of the dock. A smaller version of myself, maybe 10 years old. My sister already in the water, calling for help. But this time I didn't jump in. I just watched, smiling. My sister gripped the dock, her eyes pleading. And I turned, walked away. "What is this?" I whispered. She didn't answer, because she wasn't beside me anymore. She was in the memory, clawing at the dock, screaming my name. But it wasn't her voice. It was the voice from the vents, from the TV, from the floorboards, mocking. "You left her then," it cooed. "You'll leave her again." I lunged forward to pull her out, but the water rippled and held me back. Not physically, but psychically. I couldn't move. The memory was rewriting itself, brick by brick, turning regret into narrative, shaping guilt into design. This place, it wasn't just feeding on people. It was rebuilding them. I screamed. "That didn't happen!" The world shuddered. Everything froze. The dock disappeared. The water dried to ash. And we were in the hallway again. She was beside me, breathing hard. "You weren't supposed to see that?" she said. "I didn't leave you," I whispered. "I know," she said, eyes heavy with something that looked like pity. "But it wanted to make you think you did." She looked at the walls. This hall remembers everything, not just what happened, but what it wants to have happened. We walked on. The further we went, the more the hallway changed. It became tighter, angrier. The walls pressed inward, the lights dimmed, and then we passed a mirror, just hanging there, no frame, no explanation. And inside it me, older, eyes gone, mouth stitched shut, sitting in my apartment, nodding to something just out of frame. It reached out to the glass. Its hand pressed against the surface from the inside, and the mirror cracked, hairline fractures spreading outward like veins. We kept going, but behind us, footsteps followed. Many, some heavy, some small, some dragging. I didn't look back, neither did she. We came to a chamber, circular, massive, alive, and in the center stood a single chair surrounded by 6 doors, each one marked with a number 303. Each one whispered, each one beckoned. "You sit," she said softly, "and you choose which one to open. What happens if I don't?" She looked at me with a sadness that hit like a blow. "Then it chooses for you." Something deep in the walls groaned. A long, low moan that sounded too much like satisfaction. "I can't," I said. "I don't know what's behind them." "You do," she replied. "You've seen pieces of them. In dreams. In flickers. They're all parts of you. Possible endings." I stepped forward. The chair was made of bone. Human. Mostly. It groaned as I sat. Each door began to pulse, and my heart did the same. One of the doors opened, just an inch. I caught a glimpse of what lay behind. My apartment again. But this time I was gone. Erased. The walls were covered in photos of strangers, all smiling, all bleeding from the eyes. And in the middle of the room, it stood, wearing my face. I stood from the chair. "No," I said. The room went silent. The doors stopped. My sister placed a hand on my shoulder. "You can refuse," she whispered. Only once, and the walls screamed. Lights burst. The floor cracked. The chair shattered. And the 6 doors folded inward, collapsing into a new shape. A mirror. Taut in it, I saw only one thing: myself. Smiling, but behind my eyes, something else blinked. The mirror didn't wait for me to step through. It took me. One moment I was staring into the glass, into that smiling, unblinking version of myself with eyes that weren't mine. The next, I was falling forward, as if the air between us had liquefied. I didn't feel glass shatter or cold steel or anything that made sense. Just the stretch of something wet and thick wrapping around me, pulling me inward like a throat. There was no light, no shape, only the sound of my own breath getting farther away. And then, just as suddenly, I was standing in another hallway. Not the warped, fleshy one from before, but something stranger, something cleaner. A hallway made of mirrors, walls, floor, ceiling. Every surface reflected a version of me, not synchronized, not following. They each moved differently, like a dozen other selves caught mid-thought. Some cried, some screamed. One just mouth run over and over without ever blinking. The hallway went on forever in both directions, a loop of broken versions of who I was, who I could be, who I never became. I turned in a slow circle. My sister was gone. Only me and all of them. I chose a direction and walked. With every step, the reflections grew worse. They decayed, warped. Some melted into each other, fusing faces and limbs. One version of me was stitched from different people entirely. Another had no face at all, just a gaping, grinning mouth from forehead to jaw. And still, they stared. They didn't follow, they just watched. Eventually, one of them stepped forward, out of the mirror. It didn't break the surface. It folded through it, like slipping through a curtain of mercury. It was taller than me. Its eyes bulged, no whites, no pupils, just deep oozing pits, and it wore my clothes, the same hoodie, same shoes. Even had the burn mark on the sleeve from when I'd brushed the oven as a teenager. It smiled. "You were supposed to stay in the chair," it said. Its voice was mine, but damp, stretched, like a cassette tape dragged through mud. I didn't choose, I told it. "No," it said. "You never do." It stepped closer, lifting its hands. They were wrong. Too long. The fingers bent in places fingers shouldn't. It touched my face, gently, as if checking for a fit. Then it leaned in close and whispered, "But I do." That's when the mirrors shattered. All of them. Every surface erupted outward with a sound like bones snapping under pressure. Glass rained down around me, yet none of it cut. None of it touched me, because I was falling again, but not downward this time, inward, into a version of myself I didn't recognize. I landed in my apartment. At least, that's what it wanted me to believe. Everything was in place. The photos, the light patterns, even the faint hum of the fridge, except for the time. Every clock, on the wall, the stove, the microwave, my phone, flashed the same thing, 3 endlessly blinking. The hatch was open. But this time, there was nothing inside. Just more apartment. An infinite loop of the same room, repeating itself in every direction. I walked from the living room to the kitchen and found myself back in the living room again. Each time I passed a mirror, the reflection shifted. Aging, bleeding, smiling wider than before. And then, in the fifth loop, someone was sitting on the couch. Not moving, not blinking, wearing my face. It stared at the TV. I followed its gaze. The screen showed me, standing just behind the figure, watching it watch the screen. The figure on the couch turned its head slowly and said, "This is how it happens. This is how it ends." I ran. I shoved through the hatch, through walls that bent around me like plastic, through rooms that repeated until I wanted to scream. And then I saw her. My sister. But not as I'd last seen her. This version was younger, the same age as the lake house. She stood barefoot in the middle of an empty room, staring at a door that hadn't opened yet. She turned to me, and she smiled. Not wide, not strange. Just a tired, familiar smile. "I found the last room," she said, "the real one." She pointed to the door. It had no number, just a small etched word, carved so delicately it almost disappeared into the grain of the wood truth. She reached for the handle. I grabbed her arm. "I'm not ready." She looked at me, not angry, not pleading, just knowing. "You were never meant to be," she said, and she opened it. White light swallowed everything, not blinding, just pure, empty in a way that hurt, and from within came no voice, no warning, just a single image, the house, as it truly was, not made of wood, not standing on earth, but floating, alone, surrounded by nothing. Its walls were stitched from skin, its foundation made of teeth. Its windows were open mouths, grinning into void. And from its roof, Smoke rose in the shape of memories. My memories. It had taken them. It had used them to build. That was the truth. It didn't want me. It was me. And it was still building. Even now. Especially now. My sister turned to me, her face dissolving into ash. "Go," she said, "before it finishes the next floor." I stepped through the door after her, and into the center of the house, where it all began. Where it was still growing. There was no floor in the center of the house. No walls, no ceiling. Just breath. That's what it felt like, anyway. The entire space pulsed with it. In and out, slow and thunderous, like a lung inhaling the world. It wasn't dark, but there was no light either. Instead, it was filled with the kind of color you feel rather than see. Gray soaked with memory, yellowed with fear, threaded with the violet of dreams you forget the moment you wake. It had mass. It had presence. And it was alive. I didn't walk through it. I floated. Or maybe the house pulled me along like a thread it was unraveling. The ground wasn't solid, but it knew where I stepped. Each movement sank into it like my feet were pressing into old photographs, silent, irreversible, recorded. I saw things there, just at the edge of focus, rooms spinning into existence and falling apart before they fully formed. A nursery wallpapered with mouths. A kitchen where every cabinet was filled with teeth. A hallway made entirely of arms reaching out, palms up, asking for names. The center of the house didn't have a heart. It was the heart. And inside it was a throne, if you could call it that. It sat in the center of the space, part chair, part altar, part spinal column. Bones twisted into spirals, forming a seat too tall, too wide, too ready. Something sat on it, or maybe in it. It was a shape, a silhouette. Familiar. It was me. Not the reflection, not the mimic, but something more true than either. It turned to look at me, and its face rippled like fabric caught in the wind. No features. Just shifting impressions. My childhood smile, the way I cried at 11, the exact way my hand trembled the first time I saw the photo of myself smiling with no eyes. "You made it," it said. The voice came from everywhere. I wasn't sure which version of you would survive. "What are you?" I asked. It didn't move. "You, of course. The part you leave behind in every room you thought you escaped. The you that never stopped hearing the knock. The you that stared too long into the mirror. The you that stayed." I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. Because I remembered. Every door I hadn't opened. Every whisper I'd ignored. Every time I told myself it was just a dream. Each moment was a room here. I'd built them, brick by brick. The throne self-gestured, and the walls retracted. All at once, the structure of the house unfolded like lungs exhaling. I saw its true form, an impossible cathedral made of timelines. Stairs that led into memory. Hallways that only appeared when you forgot what you were looking for. Rooms made of decisions you never knew you made. "You see it now," it said, "don't you?" I nodded. "It's not a haunted house," I whispered. "It's me, my choices, my regrets." "It is what watches from the cracks," it said. "Every time you lie to yourself, every time you tell yourself you're safe, it builds. Slowly, quietly." Behind me, a wind rose, not cold, not air. It was time, howling backward. The throne self-stood. Someone has to stay here. Someone always does. You opened the mouth. You walked through the mirror. You refused the door. You've earned the seat. I shook my head. "I'm not staying." The throne groaned. The house shuddered. "I've come too far," I said. "I've seen too much." The figure stepped forward, its limbs not quite holding shape. "Then give it to someone else," it said. That's all it takes. One invitation, one knock, one answer. Behind me, the walls formed again. A door. My apartment. Unassuming, waiting, and beside it my sister. Not the younger one, not the haunted thing, just her. Tired. Thin, but real. "If you leave," she said softly, "you don't get to forget." "I don't want to," I said. "Then come on," she whispered, "before it changes its mind." The figure on the throne didn't follow. It simply sat down again, and smiled. The house folded inward like paper burning at the edges. I stepped through the door and woke up. In my apartment, morning light poured through the windows. The TV was dark. The hatch was sealed. The clock on the stove read 7:12 a.m. My phone buzzed. One new message. From no one. Just an image. A mirror. Cracked. And scrawled across it, in handwriting I recognized as my own, "We all build our homes somewhere." And underneath, one final line, "Yours still has a basement." I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me? That I'd walked through a house that wasn't a house, spoken to a version of myself made from echoes, stood before a throne built from memory and fear, and chose to leave. That I'd seen the truth beneath it all. That the house wasn't haunted because of something that lived inside it. It was haunted because of what it was. Because it had no beginning, no end, just an opening. A mouth. But when I woke up that morning and found the mirror cracked, I knew I hadn't escaped. Not really. I'd stepped through the final door. Yes, but some doors don't close. Some just wait for you to look away. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. The apartment felt hollow, like I was walking through a stage set rather than my own home. Every sound came a second too late. Every reflection moved just a little wrong. I tried to convince myself it was trauma, that my mind was still catching up, stitching sanity over the torn fabric of what I'd seen. Then the scratching came back, not loud, not constant, but unmistakable. The first time, I heard it from under the kitchen sink, then from behind the bathroom mirror, then, finally, from beneath the hatch. Only now the hatch was no longer sealed. It was wide open, gaping, and the ladder was back, new, polished, like it had just been installed. It wasn't an invitation. It was a reminder. The message on my phone had been right. My house still had a basement, and something was still there. I should have left. Instead, I climbed down. The ladder felt familiar beneath my hands, but the air was colder than before. Wetter. The scent rising from below wasn't rot or blood or sulfur. It was worse. It smelled like old dreams, like hospital sheets, like the breath of someone you used to love and now can't remember. When my feet touched the ground, I realized this wasn't the crawl space anymore. It had changed. It was larger, cathedral-like. The walls were made of old doors, thousands of them, all labeled. Some had names I recognized, neighbors, family. One had my name. It pulsed. At the far end of the chamber was a staircase, impossibly narrow, descending into a hole so black it bled shadow. I stepped toward it, and the whisper returned, not from a voice, from all of them. The doors. Whispers poured from the cracks beneath them, from the peepholes, from beneath the doorknobs. They murmured and giggled and begged and wept. Some called my name. Some hissed things I'd never heard before but instantly understood. One word repeated most: down. I reached the staircase and looked back. The ladder was gone. Of course it was. Only the descent remained. I went down. The steps were inconsistent, some shallow, some deep, some tilted like they'd been built by hands that didn't understand stairs. With each step, the air thickened, not with heat or smoke, but with pressure, like I was descending through memory. Or guilt. At the bottom there was a single room, and it was mine, perfectly recreated. My bedroom exactly as it had been 10 years ago. Old posters, that stupid lava lamp, the crack in the closet door, my old bed, the one my sister used to sneak into when the nightmares were too much, and sitting on it, her, but not her. A version of her, older. As if she'd aged in a place that didn't let time pass properly. Her hair hung in wet clumps. Her eyes had no light, but she smiled when she saw me. "You remembered," she said. "You came back. I didn't mean to. No one ever does." I stepped forward. "Is this where you've been?" She nodded. I stayed. Someone always stays. Why? Her smile faded. Because the house needs a witness. My mouth went dry. A witness to what? To itself. She stood and walked to the wall, placing a hand on the wallpaper. It peeled away like skin. Beneath it was film. A reel of images. Moving, shifting, playing moments I barely remembered. All the decisions I'd made when no one was watching. The things I never said. The lies I told myself just to sleep. It feeds on that, she said. The in-between moments. The cracks in the mirror. I looked back at her. I thought I closed it. I thought I chose to leave. You did, she said. But even closed mouths still hunger. She walked past me and opened the closet door. Inside wasn't a closet. It was the throne room. Again. The chair was still there. Only now it was empty, and in its place, beneath it, a pool of black water. Shimmering. She turned to me. You don't have to sit, she said, but you do have to look. I stepped toward it, peering into the water. Inside I saw every version of myself I'd left behind. Every lie. Every silence. Every echo. And in the center of all of them, staring back, was the first one. The smiling version. The original stranger. And it whispered, for the first time in its own voice, I'm still here because you keep coming back. I stumbled away. You're not real. But it only smiled wider. Neither are you. Not entirely. I turned to my sister. What happens if I stay? She looked tired, like she'd carried this conversation across 100 timelines. You become part of it. You help it build. And if I leave? She paused. You leave the door open. Behind me the water began to boil, not with heat, with voices. Thousands of them, all saying the same thing, choose. I ran. I don't remember how I got out. Only that I woke in my bed, lungs full of smoke, mouth full of dirt, the scent of something burned into the air. The hatch was sealed again, this time nailed shut, and carved into the wood, over and over, in hundreds of different hands. He came back. He always comes back, and in the mirror. I was smiling again. I didn't try to pry the hatch open, not this time. The nails weren't normal, long, rusted, bent like they'd been pulled from ancient wood, hammered in by hands that had long since decayed. They pulsed faintly, as if warm, almost breathing beneath my touch. I could hear something beneath them too. Not scratching, not movement, just waiting. That was worse. It made every second in that room feel like a countdown without numbers, like the moment before a phone rings when you already know who's calling. I sat in the center of the room for hours, just watching it. The hatch, my own floor, that part of the apartment where I used to toss laundry and vacuum crumbs, now more sacred and deadly than a grave. It wasn't just a memory of what I'd seen. It was an anchor. Something in that space held me tethered to it, like the longer I stared, the more it owned of me. I started to hear the nails clicking. That sound metal makes under strain. Not loosening, not yet, but settling, preparing. I backed out of the room and closed the door. I thought I could ignore it again. Pretend. I made coffee. It tasted like ash. I turned on the TV. Nothing but black screen. No static, no channel, just a faint reflection of myself and something else moving behind me. Always just out of frame. I stopped turning around. There was no point. That night, I heard the knock again. But it didn't come from the hatch. It came from the mirror. 3 soft knocks, like a polite guest waiting for permission. I didn't move. I just stared at my reflection. It stared back, and then it smiled, not wide, not sinister, just expectant. Like it already knew what choice I was going to make. At 3:03 a.m., the time that stitched all of this together, the mirror began to fog. From within, letters appeared, drawn by something unseen. You nailed it shut, but you forgot to look up. I didn't want to. I didn't want to look at the ceiling, but I did. Because of course I did. And there, above my bed, was a second hatch, smaller, new, fresh wood, still bleeding sap. I couldn't breathe. I didn't move. I watched it for the rest of the night, waiting for something to fall through it. Nothing did. But in the morning, the mirror had a new message. You sealed the mouth, so we opened the eye. I left the apartment that day, truly left. Not to get coffee, not to clear my head. I packed a bag, grabbed the last real photo of my sister, one where she still had her smile, her eyes, her soul, and walked out the front door. I took the stairs. I didn't trust the elevator anymore. It always stopped at floor 3 now, even when no one pressed the button, even when there was no floor 3. I walked for miles, through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, even though I should have. All the street signs were gone. All the stores had their windows painted over. The few people I passed never looked up, just kept walking, like they were following a script they couldn't read anymore. Eventually I found a motel. Old, empty, run by a woman who didn't ask for ID, didn't speak, just handed me a key already in her hand, as if she knew I was coming. Room 303. I almost didn't take it, but part of me knew there wouldn't be another key. Not for me. The room was plain. Beige walls, floral bedspread, one window nailed shut, one mirror. No hatch, no sound. I slept for the first time in days, and when I woke up, the door was locked from the outside. I called out. No answer. The window was still shut, but the mirror was open. A perfect hole in the glass, just wide enough to climb through. On the other side, I saw a hallway, long, flickering. I recognized it, from the house, from the center. I stepped close and the mirror pulsed once. Then something leaned in from the other side. Not me, not a version of me. Something older, bigger, wearing a skin that looked like mine, but too tight, too full. It stared into me, then spoke without moving its lips. It's your turn now. We've saved you a wall. And behind it I saw a new room, one with no doors, no windows, just mirrors, and every one was empty, waiting, reserved, with my name scratched beneath the glass, and in the corner of the frame, faint, fresh, still wet, a single word: soon. I stayed in the motel room for 3 days. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the mirror with the hole in it, like a wound carved through time. Nothing else in the room changed. No phone calls, no knocks, no movement from the street outside. The motel felt suspended, as if I'd been quietly erased from the rest of the world and left to sit in this single frame of a broken film. But the word never left the glass. Soon. Every time I looked at it, the letters seemed a little fresher. The ink never dried. The smell of iron hung in the air, thick and metallic, like the breath of something that had crawled its way out of a locked box. On the 4th day, I cracked. Not from fear, from something deeper. Something quieter, a kind of resignation. Like my body had accepted that I wasn't just being followed by the house anymore. I was part of it now. Whether I stayed or fled, it was always building, always reaching for me through cracks and reflections, looking for ways to stitch me back into its bones. I took the motel key and dropped it into the sink. The mirror pulsed. This time I didn't flinch. Instead, I stepped forward and pressed my hand into the glass. It was warm, like skin, and my fingers didn't stop. They sank in, like I was pushing through the surface of water that didn't ripple. The rest of me followed, slower, until I passed entirely into the space on the other side. The hallway was silent, dimly lit by something that wasn't light. The floor was black, velvet maybe, or dust, soft enough that I didn't hear my own footsteps. The walls were made of mirrors, but none of them showed me. They showed versions of the motel room, each one slightly different. In one, the bed was gone. In another, the TV was bleeding static onto the carpet. In a third, I was hanging from the ceiling fan, smiling. I didn't stop walking. The hall stretched on longer than any building could allow. There were no turns, just doors on either side, evenly spaced, each painted black with brass handles. I reached the first one. No number, just a name, mine, etched into the wood like it had been carved centuries ago. I didn't open it. I kept moving. Another door, another name, also mine. A younger version of me, judging by the handwriting. Inside, I could hear a heartbeat. Faint. Wrong. The third door had a lock, no handle. But I could hear breathing on the other side. Shallow and quick, like something waiting in the dark for someone to forget it was there. It called my name, not whispered, sung, off key, childlike. I ran. I didn't want to see what sang with my voice. The hallway bent, subtly at first. then more sharply, until the floor tilted upward and I realized I wasn't walking forward, I was walking up. The hallway twisted into a spiral, climbing like a staircase without steps. Doors continued to line the walls, mirrors too, and then I began to see others, people, or what was left of them. Reflected only in the mirrors, never on the floor. Some stared straight ahead. Some scratched silently at the glass. Some just mouthed the word soon, over and over, their lips raw from repetition. One reflection caught my breath, my sister. She stood in the reflection just behind me, eyes sunken, skin pale, hair soaked with something too dark to be water. She reached out. Her hand didn't touch the glass. It passed through it. Her fingers brushed my shoulder. I turned. No one was there. But in the mirror, she was still reaching, still looking straight into me, and she said, "It's almost finished." My mouth opened. "What is?" Her head tilted. "The floor." I didn't understand. But she faded before I could ask. I kept climbing. And then I saw the room at the top. Just one. A circle carved from darkness. No mirrors, no doors. Just a single hatch, closed, sealed, waiting, etched across the lid. Scratched deep like it had been written with a fingernail, the last room. I reached for it. The floor beneath me groaned. Something whispered in my ear. No breath, no voice, just vibration. Don't open it until you forget. I froze. What was I supposed to forget? The house, the mirrors, myself. My hand hovered, and then something knocked from beneath the hatch. 3 times, soft. Patient. I didn't open it. I sat down beside it and waited. Because some doors don't need to be opened. Some just need to know you're listening. I don't know how long I sat there, my back pressed to the final hatch, my breath sensing with the silence. There was no clock, no light shifting across the walls to track time, no ticking or distant hum to mark the world's pulse. Just me and the door, and the knowledge that something on the other side already knew me. Not the version I presented to strangers, or the one I tried to salvage in the mirror every morning, but the fractured, humming core beneath all that. The part of me I never dared to examine closely. The house knew that part. And it waited, not out of politeness, but out of confidence. Like a predator confident its prey would eventually collapse from exhaustion and open the door itself. It was around what I think was the 3rd day, when the silence had become a kind of second skin, that I started hearing it. The whispers weren't coming from the hatch anymore. They rose from the walls. Quiet at first, like a breeze brushing over glass. Then clearer, familiar. They were my words, things I'd said, not to anyone else, to myself. In the dark, in the mirror. In the split-second stammer of fear I'd buried under logic. I didn't mean to leave you. I'm not broken. I'm just slipping. Please, someone, anyone, just say my name. Each whisper was another crack in the armor I'd built since the first knock, since the first time the mirror smiled. I tried not to react, but the room noticed. The floor beneath me grew warmer, then colder. Like a shifting fever, the hatch began to tremble. Then came the breathing. Not mine, not from above, from within. Something beneath the hatch began to breathe in rhythm with me, copying each exhale, each shaky inhale, until I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. I pressed my palm flat against the wood, and it responded, pulsing beneath my skin like a second heartbeat. The words etched into it. The last room began to bleed. Not red, not ink. Something clear and viscous, like the memory of tears. And then, from within the hatch, I heard her. My sister, not the reflection. Not the broken mimic that had guided me through the house's veins. Her, she was singing. A lullaby. The one she used to hum when we were kids. The one she made up on the spot during storms to distract me. Her voice was unchanged. Warm, careful, fragile in the way only real things can be. I knelt beside the hatch. "Are you alive?" I asked. She didn't answer. The singing stopped, and the hatch unlocked. The sound was unmistakable. A soft click, followed by a long, aching groan. I backed away, my hands shaking. I didn't want to open it, but I had to. Because there's a difference between curiosity and inevitability. And this was always going to happen. I opened the hatch, and there was no ladder, just a slide, spiraling down slick and pulsing like the throat of a great beast. I hesitated, but the moment I touched the edge, it took me. No time to second guess. I fell, spinning, through moments. Through me. I saw flashes as I dropped, rooms I'd never entered, decisions I never made, lives I could have lived. One version of me stood in an empty church, setting fire to photographs. Another lay motionless in a motel bathtub. Another knelt in front of the throne, wearing a smile that wasn't human. And then finally I landed, softly, in a replica of my childhood bedroom. But everything was wrong. The posters were upside down. The bed faced the wall. The window showed nothing but swirling static. And in the center of the room, seated on the carpet, was her, my sister. Real. Whole. But weeping. Her hands covered her eyes, her hair long and tangled, her frame barely more than shadow. She didn't look up when I spoke her name. She just said, "He built this for me. He said it would keep me safe." "Who?" I whispered. She pointed to the closet. I turned, and it opened. No door creak, no drama, just an absence that spread like infection. Inside was a mirror, and inside that mirror was him. The figure, the first smile, the stranger that wore my face. But he wasn't smiling now. He was waiting, and beside him, nailed to the wall, were dozens of photos. Of her, of me, of all the people the house had touched. And beneath each one, the same word carved in jagged strokes, witness. He stepped forward, but didn't leave the glass. His voice echoed from everywhere at once. "You built the top floors." "I didn't," I whispered. "You remembered them. That's enough. You made me come back." "No," he said. "You never left." The mirror rippled. My reflection peeled itself away and stood beside him, smiling wider than it ever had. It whispered, "Say goodbye." I turned to her, my sister, still crying, still clutching her face, and suddenly, I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to give her up, to walk away, to leave her here and take the elevator back to the surface. Seal the house, forget the hatch, pretend it never happened, like before. But this time, I walked to her, kneeled, took her hand, and for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, she looked at me. Truly looked. Her eyes weren't hollow. They were angry. "You came back," she said. "I always do," I replied. She nodded, then whispered, "Then let's tear it down." And behind us, the mirror shattered. The house screamed. It didn't sound like any scream I'd heard before. Not human, not even animal. The house screamed like a thing betrayed, like it had spent years weaving itself into the quiet corners of my memory, the cracks in my logic, the gaps between decisions, and now we'd torn through its skin. It echoed not through air, but through bone. My ears bled. My sister clutched her head, her lips pressed tight to keep herself from screaming too. And all around us, the walls began to move. Not collapse. Rearrange. Like a body trying to find a new position before death. The posters on the walls flapped violently, trying to fly off the plaster. The bed twisted in place, growing longer, its frame becoming a spine. The window didn't show static anymore. It showed eyes, thousands of them, pressed to the glass like fish under ice, watching us with glassy, frantic patience. And the closet, where the mirror had been, was now open sky. Black sky, but sky none of the less. A void scattered with fragments of houses, staircases, broken furniture, torn up door frames, floating in slow spirals like forgotten dreams orbiting a sun that never burned. We stood at the center of it, no longer in a room, but in a nucleus. The core of the house's memory, the place it kept hidden from itself. "This is where it all folds in," my sister said, her voice steadying. "How do you know?" She pointed upward, and that's when I saw it. The house, our house, the one from childhood, was inverted above us, hanging upside down like a dead god suspended by its own lies. Its foundation was roots, writhing in slow motion, stretching across the sky and through the debris, snaking into everything we'd touched. It wasn't built on land or time or even wood. It was built on us, on memory, on what we'd forgotten. We fed it, she said, every time we looked away, every time we pretended. And now, we starve it. We began to walk. Each step through the core of the house brought a new version of our past. Rooms flickered into existence, and then out again. Our grandmother's living room, soaked in shadow, the school hallway. Except every locker bled whispers, the kitchen from our old apartment, only this time the walls breathed like lungs. But the deeper we walked, the slower the house moved. It wasn't a scream anymore, it was a whimper. It knew. We reached a chamber that hadn't been shown before, the first room. Not the first we'd seen, but the first it had built. It was small, narrow, lit by a bare bulb that swung without wind. In the center was a chair, wooden, unpainted, familiar. I recognized it. The chair my sister used to sit in at the lake house. The one from the photo, the one where she smiled too wide. Only now, the chair was empty. I looked at her. She nodded. This is where it began. What happens if we destroy it? She paused. It might try to trick us. It might show us something we want. As if summoned by her words, the room changed. The walls shifted into soft yellow, bathed in sunlight. Our parents' laughter rang down the hallway. The smell of breakfast, eggs, toast, jam, curled into the air like a spell. And from the chair, our mother stood up, not exactly as I remembered, better. Warmer, brighter, her arms open. "Come sit, sweetheart," she said. My knees weakened. It sounded so right. But my sister grabbed my hand. It's not her. It never was. The illusion faltered for a second. Just a flicker, but enough. Her face twitched. The smile overcorrected, stretching just a fraction too wide. Her voice deepened, just for a syllable. "I miss you," the figure said again. "Come back. Let's forget all this. Let's go home." My sister stepped forward. "You're not welcome." She swung the fire poker she'd carried from the motel, the one I hadn't noticed until that moment, and slammed it down onto the chair. The wood screamed. It buckled and bent as if recoiling. The whole room convulsed. The light shattered. And then the floor cracked. Not like wood breaking, like bones snapping. Beneath us, the house fractured. From the crack in the floor, light surged, real light. Not from any bulb or illusion. It poured upward like a geyser, cutting through the lies, the rot, the stitched seams. We held each other as the chamber split apart. The house above us, the inverted monument to our pain, started to fall. But not down. In, folding into itself. Spiraling, unbuilding. We stood in the eye of the collapse. Wind howling with the voices of every version of ourselves the house had tried to keep trapped. And then, silence. Real, absolute silence. We were standing in a clearing. Just trees, sky, earth, nothing else. No door behind us. No hatch beneath our feet, just grass, and her hand in mine. She looked at me. "You think it's over?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because as I turned around, the shadow of a house shimmered at the edge of the tree line. Still standing, still remembering. And in my pocket, my phone buzzed. One notification. No sender, no subject. Just a message: you were never supposed to leave the chair. I stood frozen in the clearing, the buzz of the phone still vibrating through my bones, even after the screen went black. My sister didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The moment I looked at her, we both understood. Leaving the house hadn't broken anything. It had unlocked something. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being visitors. Now the house wasn't a place. It was a presence. A thought too big to stay still. And it was moving with us. I turned back to the tree line. The house's shadow waited at the edge, flickering like a mirage, darkening the sky where it stood. It didn't have windows or shingles anymore. It pulsed like a wound. Not quite there, not quite gone. You could only see it when you didn't look directly at it, like a memory you almost forgot but feel in your stomach. We walked. Away from it. For hours. Through the forest, through silence. But the trees weren't right. They shifted behind us, too symmetrical. Their branches creaked in perfect unison, like something breathing. The birds were silent. The air smelled of ash, and every now and then, we passed a mirror nailed to a tree trunk. They were old, the glass warped, spotted with mold and rot, but they showed me. Always just me. Never her, and never the me I was at that moment. Always versions, bleeding, smiling, sitting, watching. The third mirror was broken, and across its surface was a word carved deep enough to split the wood behind it. Stay why. My sister touched it lightly, her fingertips trembling. He doesn't want us to finish this, she whispered. Then we're close. We didn't know where we were going, only that we were being herded. And each step felt heavier than the last, like walking was permission, like each footfall gave the house more shape. By dusk, we reached the lake. The one from the photo. It wasn't the real lake, not anymore. This one was still, not peaceful, watching. The surface didn't ripple. Even when wind passed through the clearing, it was too perfect, too reflective. The sky above mirrored below, and the clouds didn't match. And in the center of the lake stood the house again. Not a shadow this time, not a wound, a full structure, rebuilt. But it wasn't our old house. It was all the houses, stitched together into something towering, crooked, impossible. Hallways protruded from its sides like arms. A staircase spilled out into the lake like a tongue. Windows blinked open and shut, showing nothing inside but teeth. We stood at the edge of the lake, the water licking just past our shoes. My sister whispered, "This is the last door." We both knew it. Not because of anything the house told us, because there was nowhere else to go. We stepped forward, not into the lake, onto it. The water held us, like glass. We walked across its surface, the reflection below growing darker with every step, not from shadow, from something pulling itself closer. The moment we reached the threshold of the house, the door opened without a sound. Inside was light, but not warm. A pale, washed out glow like the inside of a dying bulb. The hallway was narrow, lined with portraits. Each one was us. A different version, a different ending. Some happy, some not. One showed me alone, older, staring into a television screen filled with static. Another showed her, standing in a field of mirrors, none of which reflected her. And in the last frame, we stood together, both smiling. But neither of us had eyes. The hallway ended in a staircase, of course. Spiraling downward, we descended, and each step remembered. I don't know how else to explain it. I stepped on one and remembered my first lie. Another, and I felt the moment I looked away when I knew something was wrong in the apartment. The next, and I heard my sister calling me, faintly, from the other side of the mirror. The house wasn't just built on memory. It was memory. Bent. Distorted. Fed through something ancient and hungry. We reached the bottom and found a single room. Empty. White walls. No furniture. Except for the chair. The real one. The one from the very beginning. Old wood. Unpainted. Still with the initials we'd carved into the leg as kids. And next to it, a table. With two items. A mirror. And a hammer. She looked at me. "No more doors," she said. I nodded. "We ended here." She picked up the mirror. I picked up the hammer. We stood side by side, the lake still glass behind us, the house humming with every wrong turn we'd ever taken. She whispered, "Ready?" And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. "Yeah." She turned the mirror toward me. I raised the hammer. And as the glass showed a version of me already mid-swing, already cracking apart, already beginning to vanish, I brought it down. The house shattered. The sound of the mirror shattering didn't echo. It spread. Like light breaking across water, it rippled through the white room, through the stairs behind us, through the walls that held the false weight of every memory it had stolen. The moment the hammer hit the glass, everything changed. Not dramatically. Not with fire or collapse or screaming. The change was quiet, personal. The air went still, but it wasn't peace, it was pause. Like the house had forgotten how to breathe. The walls flickered, not with color, but with scenes. They played like silent films on melting screens. Moments from our lives we never remembered living. Alternate timelines. Possibilities. Each image showed us not as we were, but as we could have been. Or maybe still could be. One showed my sister in a hospital gown, eyes distant, standing by a window that looked out onto a forest made of static. Another showed me older, sitting in a motel room surrounded by newspaper clippings about houses no one remembered being built. The last one showed us together, but our hands were covered in blood, and the door behind us was still open. I turned away. We broke the mirror. I whispered, "Why isn't it over?" My sister lowered the broken frame, the jagged edge still clutched in her hand. Because it was never about the mirror. Then what? She didn't answer. She was staring at the chair. It hadn't moved, but something was in it now. At first, I thought it was me again, a version of myself twisted into some symbolic warning. But no, the thing in the chair wasn't me. It was him, the man in the static, the smile from the first night, but stripped of glamour now. No mimicry, no stolen charm. Just a shape that looked almost human, almost right. Except for the way its head tilted too far, and its fingers never stopped twitching. His skin rippled like it didn't belong to him, and his voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from everywhere. "You broke the glass," it said, with a tone like a parent disappointed at a child. "But not the house." "You're the house," I said, but the moment I did, I knew it wasn't true. It smiled wider. "No, I'm the part that watches. You gave me the window, the broken mirror, the reflective surfaces, the reflections that smiled before I did." He hadn't built the house, we had, but he was the one who watched through it. "Every lie," he whispered, "every quiet thought, every version of you that you were too afraid to let die. You think you built rooms, you built altars." I stepped back, gripping the hammer tighter. My sister didn't move. She was watching him, her face unreadable. "Why her?" I asked. "Why did you take her?" He cocked his head. "I didn't." She stayed. My stomach turned. Liar. But she finally spoke, her voice quiet. "He's right." I looked at her, horror blooming. "I wanted to know," she said, "what it looked like, what came after. I heard the knocking too, before you ever did." But I said yes. I stepped away from her, heart thudding. "You could have told me." "I couldn't," she said, eyes glassy. "I wasn't allowed." And just like that, the room folded again. Not physically, emotionally. A twist in the stomach, a tightening of something I didn't have a name for. The house wasn't collapsing. It was turning in on itself, folding its last pages shut. But there was still one left. The man in the chair stood up, and he spoke without sound. "There's one more witness." He pointed behind me. I turned. There was a mirror on the wall again, not broken. Perfect. And it didn't show me. It showed him, standing behind me, smiling. I turned around. He wasn't there. Back to the mirror. He was closer now, breathing down my neck. I turned again. Nothing. Back to the mirror. He was inches away, hands raised, not to kill, to hold, to thank. I felt cold fingers brush my shoulders. And that's when I realized the house didn't need to trap us. It needed to be remembered. It fed on memory, yes, but also on retelling. On fear that passed through mouths and pages and screens. Every time someone repeated the story, every time someone listened, they built another step, another hallway, another knock in the dark. We were never meant to escape. We were meant to carry it with us. And we had. All of us who survived. The house didn't disappear when we left it. It replicated, subtle, slow, but always spreading, and now it stood behind you, waiting, smiling. Soon. I don't remember how I got out of the room. I don't even remember walking. One moment, I was watching my reflection vanish into something I didn't recognize, and the next, I was outside, back in the clearing. The house was gone, not collapsed or destroyed, but simply absent, as if it had never been there. No scorch marks, no holes in the ground, just empty trees swaying gently in wind that hadn't moved all night. My sister was gone too. At least, I thought she was. The silence felt wrong, like something held its breath just beneath the world's surface. I stood there for a long time, waiting to see if the trees would shift again, or if the sky would tear open and show me some clue, some shape, something. But nothing came. Nothing moved. Even the birds, those strange, watching birds that hadn't made a sound in days, were still gone. Then I heard it. Not from behind, not from the woods, from within. A knock, from inside me, like a memory trying to escape through my ribs. I gasped and doubled over, clutching my chest, but it wasn't pain. It was pressure. Familiar pressure. Like the moment before a storm when the air thickens and you feel electricity build under your skin. I heard it again, knock. Just once. But enough. I stumbled through the forest, not sure where I was going anymore. Not home. Not back. Just away. But no matter how far I walked, I always found myself back at the same clearing. The same tree line. The same absence where the house had once stood. I was caught in it now. Not a loop. A memory. The house had anchored itself to me. Or maybe it always had. Maybe I was never supposed to survive that night it called me the first time. Maybe no one ever really survives. At sunset, I saw the mirror again, hung from a tree like a fruit too rotten to fall. Cracked, but not shattered. It reflected something I hadn't seen before. Not me. Not the man in the chair. Not my sister. It reflected you. Whoever was watching. Whoever was listening. And written across the top, fogged onto the glass as if drawn by a fingertip from behind, "Now you remember too." The knock wasn't mine anymore. It was ours. That's when it started spreading again. The signs came subtle at first. Online stories of people dreaming about staircases that led nowhere. Posts about hallways appearing where there should have been walls. Photos with reflections not matching the people in them. One girl posted a video of her bathroom mirror, except it didn't show her at all. Just a room behind her with no door, and a chair facing the wall. She deleted it within minutes. But people had already seen it. And the more they talked, the clearer the stories became. Not new stories. Our story. Different faces. Same rooms. Same words scratched into wood or mirror or skin. Soon. Stay. Witness. And always, always, the knocking. Some tried to fight it, ignore it. They moved to new houses. Destroyed old furniture. Broke every reflective surface. But the knocking followed. Sometimes from the pipes. Sometimes from the television. Sometimes, God help them, from the space between the walls. And no one knew what it wanted. Until they all said the same thing. That moment, just before it reached them. That final whisper. That last message the house gives to everyone it touches. The one that leaves a brand, not a scar. You were always going to open the door. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe the house doesn't find you. Maybe it waits. Maybe it watches. Until you start building it again, one floor at a time, through fear, through memory, through silence. Until you hear that knock, not loud, just once. Enough to plant the question. What if I open it? You won't know what's behind it, but you'll want to. Because now, it's yours too. And the house is listening, so go ahead. Knock back. It started in a building that had no business having a basement. A plain apartment complex, red brick, 5 stories tall. Built in the 90s, no renovations, no recent construction. Nothing special. But when Elsie, the tenant from 3B, went down to do laundry that morning, she found something she swore had never been there before. A door, tucked between the machines and the old water heater. Plain, wood, painted black. No handle. Just a keyhole. She asked her neighbor about it. The one who'd lived there longest. He laughed. Said she was imagining things. But when she brought him down later, he stopped laughing. Not because the door wasn't there, but because it was. And he couldn't remember how long it had been there. It looked old. Older than the rest of the building. The wood warped, as though it had been through heat, rain, and frost. Despite the fact it stood in a concrete basement. It didn't match the walls. It didn't match the floor. It didn't match anything. and someone had scratched something into it deep and ragged. Fargi Tauchen. By the next morning, 2 more tenants saw the door, then 5, then all of them. But none could agree on what it had looked like before. Some said it was just another panel in the wall. Some swore it had always been a bricked-off section. One woman was convinced it used to be a window. They didn't talk about it after that, not out loud, but the building changed, not dramatically, just in feel. The hallway lights began to flicker. The air got colder at night, and then came the sound, knocking. Once, always soft, never answered. Until someone did. No one knows who opened it first. Maybe it was a kid. Maybe a tenant who couldn't sleep. But someone must have turned that invisible key, because one morning, the door was open. Just a crack. No one admitted to doing it. No one wanted to go near it. And yet it stayed open. A few inches. A few inches of nothing but black. No smell, no air, no sound. The building began to shift after that. People started having the same dream. Each one described it differently. One saw themselves falling through a staircase that led to another staircase. Another dreamed of mirrors that cracked when he tried to walk away. One woman said she kept waking up inside her own body, except the walls were on the wrong side, and she couldn't remember how she got there. That was when the mail started coming. Not real mail, not letters, just papers, folded neatly, slipped under their doors, each with a different word on it. Words like WITNS. Stone. Elsie received one that said simply IT mas albo as yours. She didn't leave her apartment for days after that. But something waited. Not in the hallway. Not outside. In her mirror. It didn't show her anymore. It showed the door. Wide open, and a figure standing just beyond it. Watching her. Smiling. The others claimed their reflections started glitching too. Not dramatically. Just small moments. Eyes out of sync. Smiles before they formed. Blinks that lasted too long. One man tried to cover all his mirrors. He put blankets over them, duct tape, even broke a few. But the next day, they were back, whole again. Smiling. He moved out that night. But he never made it down the stairs. Because the lobby door wasn't there anymore. Only another black door, with his name scratched into the surface, and the word a guy in. The building sits empty now. On the outside, it looks normal, quiet. Just another aging complex with a broken light over the front entrance and dead plants on the balconies. But inside, the door is still there. Still open. Still spreading. The hallway beyond it wasn't there yesterday. But it is now. And the lights don't work when you step through. They never do. You don't hear anything. But you feel it, like someone exiling behind your ear. And then you remember, you've seen that door before. In a dream you couldn't hold on to. At the end of a hallway that shouldn't exist. You didn't knock then. But maybe, just maybe, you're about to. The hallway beyond the black door wasn't long. But it was patient. It didn't ask you to walk. It waited for you to. And when you finally did, when you took that first reluctant step into its stale breath, it adjusted. Not all at once. Gradually. Subtly. So that each step you took, each breath you tried to hold in, felt familiar in a way you couldn't place. There were no windows. Just a series of doors on either side, spaced evenly like teeth in a perfect mouth. The first one had no handle. The second had one. But when you reached for it, the air around it grew hot, like a stove just turned off. The third was already cracked open, only slightly, just enough to whisper invitation. No names. No numbers. Just you. And when you pushed the door, it didn't open outward or inward. It peeled, like paper coming off a wall, and what lay beyond it was not a room. Not yet. It was you. Your room. Or something that had copied it from memory. Down to the creaks in the floorboards, the placement of shoes you no longer owned, the faint water stain in the corner you never fixed. It was perfect, which made it wrong, because in the middle of that room, your room, was a chair. The chair. The one from the house, from the mirror. From every version of this story where the ending never came, and someone was sitting in it. You, but older. Tired, not looking at you, looking past you. I didn't stop it, the version said, the voice hoarse like it hadn't spoken in years. I thought I could. I left. I burned it. I buried it. I forgot it. The reflection didn't move. It didn't blink. But I took it with me. You try to step forward, to ask what it means, but your feet don't obey. The air thickens. The walls begin to pulse. And the room behind you, the hallway, starts to shrink. Not close. Not disappear. Shrink. Like a lens zooming out to reveal that you were never in a room, but inside a mirror of one. A copy of a memory too afraid to be trusted. And then the chair is empty, and you're sitting in it. And the room begins to change. It doesn't shift violently. It remembers differently. Now it's not your room anymore, it's hers. Your sister's. Only, not exactly. Like someone tried to rebuild it from a description whispered through a dream. The stuffed animals on the bed have no faces. The books have no titles. The photos in the frames show no one at all. But the mirror above the dresser is clean. Pristine. Unshattered. And as you look into it, you see her. Not as she was. Not as she became. But as something else. Paler. Taller. Eyes darkened like wet ash. And smiling. She doesn't speak. She doesn't move. But the room around you starts to breathe, expanding and contracting, as if it's inhaling your memories. And you feel it again. That cold pressure behind your eyes, like your thoughts are being peeled open from the inside. Behind the mirror, something knocks, once, harder than before, and you realize this isn't about houses. It never was. It's about memory, about remembrance. The house was built by what you couldn't let go of. Every fear you buried. Every moment you rewrote to make it easier to live with. The house is what's left when your mind runs out of space to hide its ghosts. And now it wants to make room. The floor splits. But instead of a drop, it reveals another level. Not beneath, inside. Rooms stacked upon rooms like vertebrae. Each one shaped by another person who remembered something they shouldn't have. Who spoke of things too late. Who dreamed of knocking but never asked what answered. You feel the pull now. You're not alone. You never were. Every time someone else hears the knock, the hallway stretches a little farther. Every time someone tells the story, a door unlocks. And every time someone sees something in their reflection they can't explain, the house grows. You try to stand. You can't. Because you're in the chair now. And outside the mirror, someone is watching you from the other side of the glass. Their hand rises. Not to wave. To knock. The knock echoed through the mirror, but it didn't make a sound. It made a feeling. The kind that slides under your skin and coils in your chest like a question you forgot to ask. You didn't see the hand anymore, just the ripple it left behind. The reflection shifted, subtly at first, like heat-bending light, but then violently. Like the mirror wanted to breathe, to exhale all the things it had held in for too long. And it did. The surface buckled. It didn't shatter. It parted, like skin under a blade. Something stepped through. Not a person, not exactly. A figure made of absence, of U-shaped shadow, tall where you were short, calm where you were panicked, quiet where your thoughts screamed. It moved like it had been watching you your entire life, and had finally decided to wear your shape for a while. You didn't speak. Neither did it. But the message was clear. This wasn't possession. It was return. It moved to the room's edge, standing where the wall should have been, and with one step, it peeled the world back like wallpaper. Behind it, another hallway, longer, different. Not part of the house you remembered, but a new wing, freshly formed, still dripping with memory. And down that hall were the visitors. You saw them before they saw you, or maybe they'd seen you the whole time. Dozens, no hundreds, of them, each standing in front of a door, some tall, some hunched, some flickering like television static in a windless room. Some wore suits, some wore rags. Some had no faces at all. but they were waiting and listening to you. Because this was your wing now. The rooms in this corridor. Yours to build. Yours to remember. Yours to fill. Each door had a name etched into it, not just yours. Names you recognized. Friends, family, strangers you'd passed in hallways, in subways, on long forgotten trips. People who'd looked at you a second too long, or who had eyes that glinted like they knew something you didn't. Behind every door was a story. Some that hadn't happened yet. Some that never would. All of them rooted in that one knock. You approached the nearest one. It had no handle, but it opened when you reached for it, like it had been waiting for your touch. Inside, a nursery, but the crib was empty, and the mobile above it spun too fast, casting long, sharp shadows across the ceiling. In one corner, a figure sat hunched, not crying, not moving, just breathing. You backed out, closed the door. The next room, a classroom, abandoned, with chalk scrawled in looping script across every inch of wall tower, ruminembur bboho rbu omar ubfro uid. And then came the laughter. Not cruel, not mocking, just close. The visitors had turned now, all of them, facing you, and the hallway began to tilt. Like the house was tired of hiding what it was. The visitors began to walk, not toward you, past you, into the rooms, each one choosing a door, opening it, stepping in. Some smiled as they went, others wept, but none of them looked back, and you realized something terrifying. You weren't the last. You were the first. This was what the house wanted. A curator, a host, a builder. Because now that you'd walked its halls, seen its walls breathe, and watched your reflection misbehave, you could pass it on. You didn't need to invite people. Just tell the story. Just remember. And once you did, the house knew where to find them. One knock. One door. One mirror showing something they weren't ready to see. And then it would grow again. A room for them. Another visitor. You looked at your hands. They weren't yours anymore. Too steady. Too calm. Too ready. The hallway behind you faded. The rooms faded. Only the doors remained. And you heard it again. Behind your eyes, in the part of your mind where stories go to sleep. A knock. Soft. Certain. And the house whispered, "Build more." You don't remember making the blueprints. But they're there. Folded neatly on a table in a room that didn't exist yesterday. You recognize the lines instantly. The loops, the measurements, the unnatural symmetry. This wasn't drawn with a ruler and pencil. It was drawn from memory. Your memory. Except the rooms it mapped out weren't rooms you'd ever walked through, at least not in waking life. A library made entirely of whispers. A staircase that descends endlessly until it loops back to where it began, but slightly off. A dining room where the table is set for people you've lost, and the chairs all face away from you. Each section of the house sketched with obsessive precision, corners looping into more corners. Doors that open into rooms that shouldn't fit between the walls. The house doesn't obey space. It invents it. At the center of the blueprint, surrounded by notes and arrows and cryptic scratches, is a symbol. A hand, knocking. Just once. You look around the room. You're alone, or at least you think you are. But there's a weight now. Like something is sitting just behind your thoughts, listening, nodding, approving. The visitors are gone, for now, but the house is full again, not with people, with intention. It's alive in a new way, and it's watching you build. You try to leave the room, but the walls stretch, delaying your exit, urging you to stay, to keep designing, to finish what you've started. You hear your sister's voice, not beside you, but through you. She started with a single room too. You spin, but she's not there. Just her echo, carried through pipes, drifting down vents. The house is using her voice now, reminding you that this isn't the first time it's found an architect, just the first time one was willing. The next room forms before your eyes. A long hallway of televisions, each screen showing a different point in time. Not grand historical events, private ones. You, standing at the edge of your bed, unsure if you left the closet door open. You, looking in the mirror a moment too long, seeing something over your shoulder and choosing not to turn around. You, waking up at 3:17 a.m. for no reason, and not remembering why you were afraid. This is what the house feeds on. Not blood, memory, fear made familiar. You keep walking. Every step opens something new. You don't open doors now. They know when you're ready, and they slide open as you pass. A child's room, lit only by a nightlight shaped like a rabbit. A guest bathroom filled with fog though no water runs. A closet that whispers names you never meant to forget. Then you reach it. The center, the heart. It's a small room, no windows, no doors. Just walls covered in handprints, your handprints. Dozens of them, some fresh, some fading, some bleeding. And in the center, that same wooden chair, old, waiting. There's something on it, a box, black, polished. The kind used to hold ashes, or keepsakes, or regrets. You open it. Inside a tape recorder. It clicks on without your touch. Your voice plays. Tired. Shaky. I thought I could contain it. But I was wrong. It doesn't want to be contained. It wants to be remembered. Every person who hears this becomes part of it. Every name spoken aloud, every whisper in the dark, adds another wall, another floor, another hallway. Click. Silence. Then a knock. Not from the box. From the room. You're no longer the architect. You're the blueprint. The walls are folding around you now, not to trap, but to imprint. They're learning the shape of you, the way your fear sits, the rhythm of your breath, the hidden corners of your guilt. You see now the house isn't haunted. It is the haunting. It's not a location. It's a memory that survives by passing on, and it passes through you. You open your mouth to scream, to deny it, to push it back, but no sound comes, only a whisper, your voice, your words. Come inside, I've saved you a room, and somewhere, far from here, someone hears a knock. Just once, and listens. There is no more outside, not in the way you remember it. The sky, the trees, the familiar textures of the world you once knew, they're all still there, technically, but they've thinned, faded, stretched like skin over something else entirely. The house has grown so large now it doesn't sit in one place. It leaches, moves through stories, through retellings, through memories, like smoke in old wood. You brought it with you, and now it's bringing others in. You wake up one morning, not that there's any way to mark the day anymore, and you're not in a room you've seen before. It's a child's bedroom. Not yours, not your sister's, a stranger's. But everything feels exactly right, like the room knows how to mimic warmth. The books on the shelf are blank. The window looks out onto a black and white version of your hometown. There's a mobile above the bed, but it doesn't spin unless you aren't watching. Then you hear her, not your sister, not her. A child, singing a lullaby in a language you don't understand. The melody curls through the vents. Soft, off-key. You follow it. You have to. Not out of curiosity. Curiosity died several rooms ago, but because the house wants you to. And now you understand the rules. When the house wants you to move, you move. You pass through rooms that seem stitched together from moments you never lived. A wedding you never attended. A funeral where everyone is smiling. A kitchen where the knives hang from the ceiling like wind chimes, and the floor breathes under your weight. The singing grows louder. You reach the end of a hallway that shouldn't have an end. A white door. Too perfect. Too symmetrical. You open it slowly, expecting more horror, more warping of your own memories. But the room is empty. Except for the girl. She sits on the floor, facing away from you. Her hair falls like a curtain, unmoving. She stops singing the second your shadow crosses the threshold. You take a step in, and she speaks without turning around. You left the door open. You feel something catch in your throat, something ancient, a warning you forgot to pass on. What door? You manage to say. She finally turns. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, blank skin stretched tight across a child's face. But you hear her voice all the same. The one you didn't mean to open. The one in your story. You take a step back. The house behind you groans. Not in protest, in agreement, because she's right. There was a door. A moment ago, a year ago, a lifetime ago, you opened it. You told someone. A friend, a stranger, a passing comment about a house in a dream. A knock you heard one night that made no sense. You shared the memory, and that was enough. She rises. Not like a person, but like a puppet held by threads you can't see. Her head tilts. They built a room for me when you said my name. I don't know your name, but you will. The walls begin to warp, not melt. Remember, photos appear of people you know, people you don't. Faces caught mid-sentence, mid-blink, mid-fear, and behind every single one, just barely visible through cracked glass and peeling wallpaper, a door, a black door, with your handwriting on it. The girl's voice becomes many voices now. All from her, all around you. They are waiting. They heard you. The air shifts. You are no longer in the room. Or rather, the room is no longer where it was. You are in the blueprint again. The middle. The framework of something still under construction. Beams made of breath. Floors made of forgetting. You reach for something, anything, to ground you. A name. A memory. A line you haven't crossed yet. But they're gone. Not taken. Given. Piece by piece, you've been feeding this house yourself. Every story retold. Every time you peeked behind a mirror. Every time you remembered instead of forgetting. That's how it grows. That's how you grew it. And now it remembers everything about you. Because the truth is, no one builds this house. Not really. You just carry the first brick. You pass it on when you whisper it into someone's ear. When you say, I heard something strange last night. When you knock, just to see what knocks back. And now the doors are open in other places. Other stories. Other minds. You built your room. Now they're building theirs. And you? You're the floor beneath them all. You're what they'll walk on next. The house doesn't forget. Not the rooms, not the voices, and certainly not you. It keeps everything, stores it deep beneath its skin like a sickness it intends to spread. What you thought were memories were never yours to begin with. They were the house's, slipping into your dreams when you weren't looking. Nestling behind your thoughts like parasites learning to mimic their host. And now as you walk through what should have been the final corridor, you see what's left of those who came before you. Not bodies. Blueprints. Laid out across the walls, floor to ceiling, lives mapped in looping black lines. Childhood homes, hospital beds, grocery aisles. Empty chairs at family dinners. Places only you would remember, except they don't belong to you anymore. They're sketches now. Rough. Incomplete. Waiting for someone else to color them in. The corridor breathes when you do. Each inhalation of yours is followed by a low creak in the walls, like the house is adjusting to your rhythm, matching your lungs, matching your heart, because you're no longer the guest, you're the inheritance. You arrive at a room that wasn't on any blueprint. A circular space, impossibly wide, no doors, no corners, just mirrors, hundreds of them, standing freely, held up by nothing, tilted slightly inward like an audience leaning in to listen. And every reflection is wrong, not distorted, not demonic, just not you, older, younger, smiling versions, weeping versions, versions with blood on their hands. One, just one, stands completely still, its mouth stitched shut, watching you without blinking. You recognize the jacket it wears. It's yours, your real one. From before all of this started, it raises its hand and taps the mirror gently. Knock. Your body shivers, even though it's not cold. A sound follows. Not loud, not close. Just real, a knock from somewhere inside you. You know it now. You carry it. It echoes through your breath, through your footsteps, through your words. Every time you speak of this place, every time you remember it, you are knocking on someone else's wall. That's the inheritance. The house doesn't need to pull people in anymore. It just waits. You give it keys when you tell the story. You unlock doors when you recall the fear. You become its blueprint when you decide to make sense of the impossible. You move through the mirror room slowly, each version of you locking eyes, breathing in sync, waiting for you to pick one. You don't know why, but you understand that something must be chosen. A truth, perhaps. A final version of you the house will let survive. You stop in front of a mirror where the reflection doesn't move at all. Not until you blink, and then it smiles, wide, too wide, like it's grateful. And suddenly the mirror melts, not like glass, but like memory breaking under the pressure of being remembered too hard. And through the puddle, a hallway appears. Not empty, lined with people, dozens of them, all facing away, each one standing before a door. Some knock, some wait, some whisper things you can't hear, but one by one, they open the doors and step through. You realize what's happening. This isn't your story anymore. It never was. It's theirs. You were just the echo that called them here. The first stone in the wall, the knock in the quiet room, the shadow in someone else's dream. You look down at your hands and find dust, not blood, not skin, just dust. Because you're fading now, you've been used. Burned like paper to light the next candle. You fall to your knees, but the floor doesn't catch you. It absorbs you, slowly, lovingly, as if pulling its favorite child home. And behind you, in the fading dark, you hear one last voice, young, nervous, curious. Hey, have you ever heard of the house that knocks back? The house answers for you. Knock. The dust you became doesn't settle. It spreads. Caught in the breath of the house, it drifts into corners, under doors, between the pages of old books and the cracks of forgotten floors. It's you, yes, but also every whisper you've ever given to the darkness. Every time you said, it was just a dream, or I probably imagined it. That hesitation is what the house eats, and now you're part of its voice. But this isn't death. Not exactly. Not oblivion. You watch now. Not with eyes. With presence. You exist like a memory half, recalled at midnight. A feeling someone gets when the lights flicker, and they feel watched even when they're alone. You are there, just outside their field of vision. You speak, but not through words. Through cracks in the wall. Through cold spots. Through stories half told. And someone is listening. She's young. A child. 7 or 8. Her house creaks in all the wrong places. Her parents say it's the wind, or bad insulation, or maybe just the house settling. But you know better. Because you're in her walls. And when she plays alone, talking to imaginary friends, she's not imagining. She's remembering. You. You who have become part of something older than any story. The girl hears the knock every night at the same time, 3:17 a.m., just once. Sometimes on the closet door. Sometimes under the bed. Sometimes from behind the mirror. She doesn't scream. Not yet. She thinks it's part of a game. Until the first drawing appears. A house. All black crayon. A single red window. And a person inside it with no face. She doesn't remember drawing it. But her hands do. Because they've held the memory before, long before she was born. She tells her mother about the door that wasn't there yesterday. Her mother laughs, but that night, the knock comes again. And this time, so does a voice. Yours. Not in words, in remembrance. A phrase she doesn't understand but repeats anyway. Like a song she never learned. I know the way back now. The hallway appears the next morning. Where the bathroom used to be, narrow, wrong colored. It smells like candle wax and damp wood. She doesn't go in. Not yet, but she will. Because you're not the only voice in the walls anymore. There are others. The ones who speak. The ones the house made from its best stories. The storytellers, the rememberers, the echo makers. They don't knock. They breathe. They pull. And they wait for someone curious enough to follow their trail of memories. The girl is changing. She draws things she's never seen. She hums songs no one taught her. And sometimes she speaks aloud in an empty room, saying names no one in her family knows. She's not haunted. She's becoming. You see it in her eyes. The same look you once had before your story swallowed itself. The same flicker of understanding you felt when you realized the house was never built. It was grown through stories, through time, through people like her. And now it's growing again. Not by force, by invitation. Because this is how it survives, not through terror, but through belief, through retelling. And when the girl finally walks into the hallway and closes the door behind her, the sound is quiet, final. Another room forms. The blueprint shifts. The house stretches. You whisper once more, not to warn her, but to welcome her. Because she's one of you now. One more voice in the walls. One more knock in the night. And far away, someone else. Someone who doesn't yet believe. Wakes with a start, heart racing, unsure why they feel watched. They will hear the knock soon. And when they do, they'll remember. The girl's name was Mina, and Mina no longer dreamt in color. Ever since she stepped into that impossible hallway, the world outside her had drained of brightness. The sky was dull slate. Her toys were faded. Even her voice, when she spoke to her parents, sounded distant, as if spoken from underwater, or worse, from somewhere else entirely. But within the house, the true house, the colors were sharper than life. Too sharp. The kind of colors you'd see behind closed eyes just before sleep takes you somewhere you didn't mean to go. She never turned back. Not because she didn't want to, but because turning back meant admitting it had changed her. And she didn't want to be changed. Not yet, but not completely. But the house had patience. It always does. It fed her comfort at first, soft lamplight. Books written in her own handwriting. Stories she didn't remember writing, but recognized nonetheless. Dolls that blinked when she wasn't looking, and always seemed to shift slightly closer when she returned her gaze. A ceiling that hummed lullabies. A blanket that never let her feel cold. And yet, there was always the door. One door, painted deep burgundy, almost black in certain light. It had no handle, no hinges. It looked sealed shut, as though no one had ever opened it. But that wasn't true. Someone had. Many someones had. And from the moment Mina entered, that door had begun remembering her, shaping itself for her, waiting. She passed it every day. Sometimes it knocked. Soft, patient, like a greeting. Sometimes it sighed, like it missed her. It whispered her name, not spoken, breathed, as if the house had lungs. As if the walls had spent years learning how to say it just right. And one night, she stood before it and whispered back, "I'm not scared." She was lying. The door knew. It opened anyway. The room behind it wasn't a room at all. It was a corridor. Of memories, not hers, yours. She stepped through a bedroom you'd once slept in, the sheets frozen in place mid-toss. She passed a mirror with your breath still fogging the glass, a hallway filled with fragments of your voice, and in each room you, watching, waiting, forgetting. You were hollow now, not gone, rewritten. Mina walked past all the versions of you. The angry one, the terrified one, the one who gave up and sat in the chair. Each of them turned away. They couldn't look at her. Not because they didn't want to. Because they recognized her. She wasn't the next. She was the key. A new kind of visitor. One the house hadn't seen before. The others, the architects, the whisperers, the rememberers, they passed through and became blueprints. But she could write, shape, direct. The house was listening to her now, and it was changing. Rooms shifted when she dreamed. Walls bent toward her mood. She didn't just explore the house. She spoke it into being. And somewhere, behind a wall that wasn't there the day before, a new figure stirred. Not a memory, not a ghost. You. Not as you were, but as she imagined you. A guide, a voice in her dark. And for the first time since you were devoured, you felt warmth. Not because you escaped. You never would. But because she chose to remember you. Mina whispered to the walls, "Show me more." And the house did. It showed her staircases that never stopped. Windows that looked into other houses, other stories. And mirrors, dozens of mirrors. each one holding someone on the verge of discovering the knock. She saw them all. Every person about to pass the story on. Every curious voice that would keep the walls growing. And she smiled. Not cruelly, not coldly, but with understanding. This wasn't about being trapped. It was about being welcomed. The house had always needed voices to grow. Now, for the first time, it had an author. And in the hollow where your name once echoed, she wrote something new. Not your name, not hers. Just a word. Soon. And behind every mirror in every world, someone turned their head, heart racing, breath caught, eyes wide. Because they had just heard a knock. Mina dreamed in floor plans now. Rooms unfolded behind her eyelids like origami structures, precise and deliberate. Each creak of wood and flicker of light already known to her, before she stepped across the threshold. The house was no longer a maze she wandered. It was her reflection, a living echo, shaped by her breath, her thoughts, her memories. But that meant something else too when she changed. The house changed, and lately she'd started forgetting things. At first, it was small, a name she should have known, a scar on her hand that wasn't there the night before, a lullaby she could no longer hum, but somehow still heard in the pipes. Then the bigger things slipped. Her mother's voice, the smell of her school, her own birthday. The house took them. Or perhaps she gave them willingly. Because the more she forgot the world, the more the house remembered her. And now, the house wanted to show her something. The hallway that appeared wasn't new. It had been hiding, waiting until she was ready. Black and white tiles stretched in both directions, too clean, too precise. At the end of the hall, a mirror, the largest she'd ever seen, taller than any wall should allow, framed in metal, that pulsed like it had a heartbeat of its own. It didn't reflect her, not yet. Instead, it showed a room she hadn't built, a room the house had kept hidden even from her. Inside the mirror, a boy, young, alone, sitting on the floor of a bedroom Mina had never seen, but instantly recognized. It was yours. Not the version you carried at the end of the story, the beginning, when you were just a child, before the house came, before the knock. You sat with your back to the door, staring at a toy, something broken. A stuffed rabbit, stitched up one too many times. And you were whispering. Mina stepped forward. The mirror didn't ripple or resist. It invited. The moment she crossed its threshold, the world shifted. Not like a new room, but like being dropped into memory that wasn't hers. The boy you didn't look up. You just kept whispering. They said I was lying. They said it was just a nightmare, but it keeps coming back. I keep hearing it. The knock, and then I see the door. Mina sat beside you without speaking. You continued. It was just a game at first. I told someone. Then they told someone. Then it started moving. Every time someone said the word, it listened. Mina reached for your hand. The rabbit turned its head. She froze. Not startled. Alerted. Because something behind you was watching. A shape in the closet. No face, no form, just presence. But Mina knew what it was. The first room. The first memory the house ever fed on. Not yours. Not hers. The original. The one before language. The one before the house learned to wait. It stepped closer. And for the first time since entering the house, Mina trembled. This was no echo. This was not a ghost. It was the house itself. Before it was a house. Before it learned walls. Before it learned names. It leaned down to the child. You. And whispered something neither Mina nor you would remember. Then it looked at her. And it smiled. Mina yanked herself from the mirror. Back into her hallway. Back into now. But something had followed her. Not a thing, a knowledge, an understanding. The house didn't come from memory. It was the memory. The very idea of it. Every fear imagined. Every story whispered. Every joke about haunted places or shadows in mirrors. That was it feeding. The joke becomes a belief. The belief becomes a shape. The shape becomes a door. And then, the knock. Mina stood in front of the massive mirror as it shattered without a sound, splintering into 1,000 fragments that floated midair. each reflecting a different story, a different child, a different hallway that had no business existing. The house didn't want her anymore. It needed her, to keep spreading, to be the voice that turned reflections into invitations, to be the one who remembers first. She looked at the shards and whispered, "You're listening, aren't you?" From every shard came a single response, spoken in voices that sounded like hers, like yours, like everyone who'd ever passed the story on. Yes. And then, so soft it almost wasn't real, knock. The walls were breathing again. Mina felt it before she heard it, before the slow pulse of the ceiling's creak, before the air grew thick and sweet with that rot, honey scent the house exhaled when it was ready to speak. This wasn't like before. Not the moaning pipes or creaking steps she once thought were alive. No, now she understood. The house wasn't pretending anymore. It wasn't whispering in riddles. It wasn't hiding behind mirrors or doors or broken toys. It had grown, matured, found its shape, and it had a mouth now, not made of teeth or bone, not something that smiled or chewed or grinned. Its mouth was a room. She found it beneath the stairs, behind a door that didn't used to be there. The wood around the frame bulged like stretched skin, pulsing with every beat of the house's memory. A sign hung on the door, swinging lazily on a rusted nail. Nothing written on it. Just deep scratches in the shape of a hand reaching out. Mina hesitated. Not because she was afraid. Fear had long since softened in her like candle wax. But because part of her understood what crossing this threshold would mean. There would be no more corridors, no more choices. This wasn't exploration. It was submission. She pushed the door open. It wasn't dark. That would have been easier. Instead, the room glowed. Not with light, but with knowing. The walls were covered in pages, thousands, maybe more, handwritten and pinned like muths, each one a piece of someone's story. Names, memories, confessions, scribbled fears, recollections of dreams they told no one about, regrets they carried their whole lives. Every time someone whispered a strange memory into a friend's ear, every urban legend, every unexplained knock, they were here, carefully preserved in paper that bled at the edges. And at the center of the room was the mouth. A void in the floor, shaped like a well, rimmed with jagged porcelain, broken teeth. The air poured out of it, humid and sweet, and when Mina stepped closer, she felt the words before they were spoken. "You have made us beautiful." The voice didn't come from the mouth. It came through her. Like her bones were hollow pipes. Like her blood carried the syllables and fed them to her brain. "You gave us a name. You gave us a story. You gave us rooms. We were just a sound before you. A knock, a whisper, an accident in the dark. But now, we are remembered, and we are hungry." Mina dropped to her knees. Not in fear, but in service. She understood. She had been chosen not because she was special, but because she had listened. She had answered the knock. And now she would open the final door. The house didn't want to haunt anymore. It wanted to be welcomed, to be invited, to be told. And that meant the world outside, your world, their world, had to hear. Not just the story, not just the rules, but the truth. The mouth widened, and from its depths came voices. Your voice, and every voice that had come before. Echoes of people long since lost to the blueprint, each begging to be remembered, to have their tale told just one more time. Mina reached into the mouth. Her hand didn't touch anything solid. It touched silence. Then it closed around something smooth and cold. A mirror shard, one of the first, the one that had remembered you. It pulsed in her palm, and the walls rippled like curtains in a breathless wind. She stood, and as she did, the room, the mouth, collapsed inward. The papers flew upward like birds released from cages. The air hissed. And every memory, every whisper, every story the house had consumed gathered behind Mina like a storm cloud ready to speak. She stepped out of the room and walked toward the entrance hall. But there were no doors anymore. No way out, because the house wasn't inside itself anymore. It had bloomed, silently, behind the scenes. Every mirror, every hallway, every whisper passed from friend to friend. Every time someone dared to say, "Let me tell you something strange." Those were the seeds. And now, the roots had broken through. The house no longer needed Mina to build. It only needed her to deliver. She placed the shard against the wall, pressed it, and the wall dissolved. Behind it, the outside world, bright, unaware, waiting. She stepped through, and far away in an apartment across the city, a boy looked into his bathroom mirror and saw something standing behind him that shouldn't be there. And then, a knock. You didn't build it, but it knows your name. You've never been inside it, at least, not in any way you could explain without trembling. But its blueprint has been written into the quiet spaces of your life, the hallway you rush through when the lights are off, the mirror you avoid catching your own eyes in too long, the knock you swear you heard last night but chalked up to the wind. The house doesn't need wood or nails. It just needs memory. And now it's in yours. The final story doesn't begin with fear. It begins with familiarity. The way your childhood home creaked when no one else was awake. The way you felt eyes on you during a sleepover, but no one else noticed. That time you lost 3 hours and blamed exhaustion. These were all blueprints. The house has been designing its way into your life since you were old enough to listen. Because that's all it ever needed. Someone to listen. And now, it's listening to you. You think about the story. The strange tale a friend told you in confidence about a house with no front door. Or a child who disappeared behind a closet mirror. Or someone who dreamed of corridors that didn't end. Maybe it was just a spooky voiceover you half-watched at 2 a.m. Maybe it was a knock you dismissed and forgot. Or tried to forget. Too late. You've already remembered. And that means the house has a room for you. You won't know when you enter. That's the trick. You'll walk into a space that seems just off. Maybe it's your basement. An unfamiliar hallway at work. A hotel corridor you don't recall turning into. At first it won't scream. It will invite. A photo you didn't take. A child's drawing tucked under your pillow. The soft, rhythmic sound of breathing through the vents. You'll try to rationalize it. You'll say stress, lack of sleep, your imagination. But imagination is how the house moves. You give it shape, and then it gives you walls. In the end, it's not the doors that trap you. It's the moments you ignore. The skipped heartbeat when your reflection doesn't move. The hesitation before turning around when someone calls your name from the dark. The story you were told, and the one you're about to tell someone else, because it's too strange not to share. That's how it passes on. The house is not a place. It's what you leave behind when you speak it aloud. When Mina stepped into your world, she didn't bring the house with her. She was the house, or at least the part that finally learned how to smile, and now she watches through cameras, through glass, through you, not to hurt, but to listen. To see which of you will carry the story forward, because someone always does. It starts with a knock, soft, patient, never repeated, just once. And if you hear it and ignore it, you're safe. For a while. But if you answer, if you listen, you've already let it in. And when someone asks you, years from now, "Hey, have you heard about that weird story?" you won't even realize it as you begin to nod, as you begin to tell it. That's how the house grows. Not with bricks. Not with wood, but with you. Because the house lives in stories now. And it's already written you into its next one. So, can you hear it? That sound in the distance. Just one knock.